Hello, Podsmashers of the Internet, and welcome to another bonus episode of 80-Bit Podsmash, where gaming goes to grab a beer. We are generally a weekly video game podcast, smashing together ideas that you care about with video games, but this is a special bonus episode that will go unedited. It'll go live immediately after we record this, and it will be all about The Last of Us Part 2. We're going to go into spoilers and talk about everything in depth.
Yep, we're doing a Spoilercast. We did one of these. We've been experimenting with these recently as our way of reviewing the games that we think we want to review together. Obviously, we both have different game tastes, so we tend to play many of the same games, but we also tend to play many different games. So when the stars align and we actually play the same game because it's a important and revolutionary game and it just came out, then we like to do a nice little spoiler cast. We did one for Final Fantasy VII Remake because we were hyped about it and we definitely wanted to break it down in its own episode, and we feel the same about The Last of Us Part 2. So we're going to do this, and we'll do this for other games too, probably. So This is something we think
Rona has
successful.
Actually created a pretty good planet alignment for us.
We
played Doom Eternal together, and we platinumed that. Working
we
together
didn't do
online.
We didn't do a spoiler cast for that, actually, but we don't.
And then we did Final Fantasy VII Remake, and here we are with Last of Us Part 2, and Ghost of Tsushima is next.
Ghost, we'll both be playing Ghost of Tsushima at the same time, so that will probably be our next one, if we feel it is worth talking about. I mean, all games are worth talking about, but worth doing an entire 2-hour long spoiler cast, we'll see. The structure of this is we're not going to do our news, we're not going to do our normal segments, we're just going to pretty much jump right into our thoughts and opinions and feelings and emotions and trauma on The Last of Us Part 2, and just kind of jump right in. So the one structure that we will have is we're going to have a non-spoiler section for those who enjoy listening to us weekly but haven't played The Last of Us and want to but don't want to be spoiled. So we'll have a non-spoiler section where we'll talk about things like the design of the game, we'll talk about the gameplay, we'll talk about trophies, and we will, in this case, talk about some of the controversy surrounding the game in a non-spoiler way, because there's some interesting things that have kind of happened around the game. And then once we're done with that, we'll jump right into spoilers, and we will give you a nice warning ahead of time that we are going to be talking about the story and about the characters and about the things that happen to the game, and that will be very, very laden with spoilers, hence the title Spoilercast. So without any further ado, I think we should jump right into it. Termite, what did you think of The Last of Us Part 2?
Oh my gosh. We're not going to go into Game of the Year discussion. That's going to be a really cool episode or something content piece that we will do later after we played Ghost of Tsushima. And I don't even know if Cyberpunk's in the running based on its release day and the cutoff point for...
We'll do it. We'll follow the lead of the industry or Greg Keeley or whatever, and we'll...
Yeah, it makes sense.
We'll do it closer to December when the year's over, when the actual Game Awards are happening, and we'll do it when we actually have a list of what the contenders are from an industry. We'll support the actual video game awards as an organization, and we'll cue off of them for what they think the contenders are, and if we disagree with them, we'll talk about why we disagree with them.
That's what we're here for, right?
There is no doubt that The Last of Us Part 2 will be up for that award, and Termite is of the mind that it will win it. So
I wasn't going to say that, but since you threw me under the bus,
I figured you can still you can say that. You can say that, yeah, for sure. Based on what we've had this year. 2,
yes. My general thoughts of The Last of Us Part 2 is that it has moved me across the entire emotion spectrum in a very unique way that no single video game has ever done for me in this type of an experience. And Final Fantasy VII is close, but I've relived that story a lot over the years. It's my single favorite game of all time, and I still might stand to that because I think the story of Final Fantasy VII is a little bit more than The Last of Us. But that's an aside. That's not what I'm comparing it to. What do I think of The Last of Us Part 2?
Yeah, it's also 1997. So for 2020 to kind of have, it's moved the needle in the same way that Final Fantasy VII moved the needle back in 97. So
yes, exactly. Great comparison. Thank you. I'm glad that you pulled that out of my head because that's exactly what I was thinking, and you put words to it. No, seriously, I'm not being facetious. So this game is absolutely phenomenal, artistically, musically, aesthetically. It's everything that is the epitome of what the PlayStation 4 can do. It is awesome. It
can definitely do heavy, loading screens.
It's thought provoking. It's impactful. Includes loading screens, which is a PS4 thing. And
it's like the PS4 thing.
This is, you go back to our episode 0 when we talk about, actually episode 1, where we talk about whether games can be art. This is undoubtedly a major piece of art. And if you were to like go to an art gallery where one single piece of art is usually highlighted over all of the rest, if it's what's current, exhibits change throughout the times. This is that. This is the game that epitomizes art in video game format for 2020 for this year.
I definitely don't
want an experience. That's what it is.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree. This game is absolutely art, and for that reason, it is very controversial. Now, I will just sort of say I did love the game. I did really, similar to Termite, it absolutely moved me. And I ended up being very pleased with the ending, which we will talk about the reasons why. I don't think the game deserves all the hate that it's getting, but we'll break that down in regards to when we get to sort of the end of the non-spoiler section. But my overall impression is the game where it is absolutely a game worth playing. It is kind of it's Naughty Dog and that team at the top of their craft. It is not without criticism, but that's what the whole rest of this episode will be talking about. It will be the good and bad of The Last of Us Part 2. So anyways, without further preamble, let's jump into our non-spoiler section and start with talking about the overall design, aesthetics, artistic elements. So things like music, aesthetics, visuals, graphics. You can even dip slightly into things like performances, as much as they don't relate to spoilers. So yeah. I will say that my first initial thought, and the only thought that I have recorded here that I wanted to make sure I said, was this was one of the few games that made me actually wish I had a PS4 Pro. I imagine this game was actually optimized. Well, PS4 Pro and a nice TV. I imagine this game was optimized for PS4 Pro in a way that it was not for the regular PS4. That's not to say that it still wasn't beautiful on the PS4, but it definitely, as I was playing it, I was like, you know what? I bet that texture would have loaded in faster if I had a Pro. Or, you know what? The frames kind of dipped in that spot because this game probably was designed with the Pro in mind. So yeah, I didn't have probably quite as good of a graphical experience as you did. But never at any point did it ever take away from the experience for me. So that's kind of a point in its favor. So even though I noticeably had a less graphic fidelitous moment or experience with it, it was also it was still fine. It was still there were gorgeous scenes. The music was good. It wasn't like when
did you play with headphones?
No, that might have impacted it.
Oh my gosh, yeah, but you need headphones.
I will say though that when the music kicked in a good way, it kicked in a good way, but. Yeah. It's very, very kind of twangy, do like Firefly, I think. And I get a lot of Firefly vibes from it at certain points, or Red Dead Redemption. But a lot of the game is intentionally no music as well, and that's a choice that fits the intensity of the story and the intensity of the moments. But when you're talking, and so it's still a design choice. But when you're talking about the music, like there are games that I've played recently that I would say have better music, but the music is still good when it's there. So I will let you talk for a little bit now.
Yeah, sure. From the aesthetic point of view, I played on a PS4 Pro hooked up to a 1080p TV, and I have it set on super sampling, which tricks your PS4 Pro into thinking that it's hooked up to a 4K TV so that it downscales the 4K image that it produces internally. So the PS4 Pro renders a 4K image in itself, and it sends it to the TV as a downscaled 1080p image. And what you get when you do that is better anti-aliasing at the performance cost of 4K. So I didn't notice a single hitch in any single frame, and it looked absolutely phenomenal. It was a solid performer all the way across. I never once thought of the technical prowess or the lack of a technical box. Like, I never thought it was lacking at all. It was absolutely stunningly right. Like, Final Fantasy VII Remake was exactly the same. It was like locked 30 frames per second, and it never changed. Solid. It was awesome. With that, everything about this game and how it was crafted shines. Motion capture, animations conveying emotion and characters in the minute details of their face and their eyes and their lips and how they talk and move. Their animations in fluidity with combat system and how you can jump over obstacles and melee enemies. At the same time, you can slide under people and shoot someone in the head, and then like jump down off of a cliff and land on someone with a knife. And like the fluidity of all of that, it never hitches, it never messes up, and it's absolutely what you want, what you can make of it. And it looks unbelievably realistic when it comes to the motion capture of every animation of hand waving and arms moving, legs. Like there's no clipping, there's no hitching. You're not teleporting through things. Like even the weapons didn't go into your legs like older games do. The minute details of when you upgrade your weapons at the workstation, like how awesome was that? Like throw your weapon down and like take it all apart, clean it, polish it, like new parts, and like click, click, click. And so like that's the visuals, of course. Then you go into like environmental storytelling. It's like if you had everything muted and you knew nothing about what was going on and you never paid attention to a single line of dialogue and you just walked through the world and you could write a story about what's going on in this world just by what you see around. Every time there's like a note in an artifact that you have to find or pick up, because it's part of the collectibles for the trophies, you can read these notes, but you can look at where you found it and it tells the backstory. It's like there's a person who died because they left the base camp and here they are, and you can see a clicker jump out. Well, that clicker happens to be that person's partner. Actually, it's the person's partner that didn't commit suicide when they agreed to kill each other.
Yeah.
And you can see both bodies, and you can see that they're in a hotel and that they had like set up a little base camp, and you can tell because there's duffel bags and like cots and there's things like spread around, and it's messy because they were attacked. And that's just one example. Like every single building, even like a coffee shop in the middle of rundown Seattle, like has what it would look like if everyone just ran out of the building really quickly and then it decayed for 20 years.
Yeah.
It looks
my favorite
exactly
was
like
my favorite was the bank heist one, because there was like it was like a group. I mean, the story is told through like two different notes where like they're like, we're gonna rob this bank during all the chaos of Outbreak Day, and then, or was it, I don't remember if it was Outbreak Day or not, it doesn't matter. They're like taking advantage of the apocalypse to rob a bank, which is ironic because money means nothing in an apocalypse. But then they get trapped there or whatever, and their heist fails. But you find the bodies, you get like a shotgun from it, and then the slightest.
I don't say anything. Spoilers.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I will say there's a very clever Easter egg that is included in that scene as well. So. All right. And then I will move into music and sound real quick before we move on. I played with the PlayStation headset, the gold wireless headset, and the sound design is absolutely incredible. The experience of 3D positional audio, every single sound in the game is crisp, and the subtleties and the nuances across loud things, quiet things, the music, breathing, footsteps, the tension as story beats were unfolding. There's like this juke juke, almost like Hamilton, right? It's like juke juke, juke juke, juke juke that's going on that like emboldens like the tension in a scene as things, and then like the frivolity of the guitar chords, and like it eases tension as well. And it, just from a music and sound design perspective, you have the guitar that you can do all the chords with. As you progress through the game, you can pick up a guitar and practice and play. There's people online like doing covers and stuff. It's just totally like all of the little details. This game really is way greater than the sum of all of these little parts. Mm-hmm. And so that's, well, I like I like how you brought up the guitar thing. Like there are actual famous musicians who have picked up the guitars.
My favorite band of all time, Blink-182.
Really?
Mark Hoppus, which is the bass player and vocalist of the band, picked up and did a cover of a song. I know we're a family-friendly podcast, but the name of the song is Damn It.
I know the song.
And he did it it was very slow. Like the pace of Damn It, it's way faster in real life than it is in the game, but he did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's like, it was so cool.
Nice. Cool. All right. Well, let's talk then. Let's move on and talk about gameplay, including combat and other various systems. One thing I want to talk about before we actually talk about how the game plays itself, I do want to briefly we're going to be touching on this a little bit more in our next episode. We want to talk about accessibility options in The Last of Us. The game has the most robust accessibility features I have ever seen. They made it like, so not only can you adjust things like colorblind mode, or you can customize any of the controls for any of the things. So if you are literally handicapped, like don't have all of the tools that everybody else has, whether it be a missing finger or missing arm, they literally have options where you can adjust the controls to fit your playstyle. They even have features for people who may have learning disabilities or may struggle with very particular tasks in the game, like puzzles, spatial reasoning, and stuff like that. So, like, you can literally go as granular as, like, I want the combat as high difficulty as possible, but I want the puzzles to be skippable or easier or whatever. You can literally adjust. You can adjust it so that there's auto aim. You can adjust it so that you can have the story tell you where to go if you like left click the L3 button so that it shows you. You can do high contrast modes. So you can literally make everything seeable, like, and they'll highlight like what are collectibles, what are enemies, which one's Ellie, which one's the character you're playing. So it's got a very robust game. So I will definitely applaud it, and we'll have a whole conversation about accessibility options, and we'll definitely highlight that in our next episode. So
it was so good. Someone was posting on Reddit. Of course, internet toxicity struck, as it always does, and someone was like, "Oh, so platinums should be achievable by blind people now?" And my response was, "Yeah, because blind people don't deserve to get platinums." Sure.
Yeah.
And like,
yeah, for real.
In that conversation, I'm like, wow, if you are legally blind and you have a bunch of like visual challenges to overcome, you can platinum this game while being blind.
And isn't that arguably more impressive?
Amazing.
Like, it's more impressive to be able to platinum a game without, the faculties that other advantages other people have. That's incredible. So, anyways, it's actually not going to be the next episode, because when this drops, there'll still be 2 episodes between it. So it'll be in a few episodes. We'll talk about that more. But all right. So cool. I do want to break down combat and some of the systems in the game. I know that you and I have some disagreements here, so hopefully we won't spend too much time arguing. But so I'll just talk about combat first. I will say that I was a little bit disappointed. I'll come out and say there's nothing wrong with the combat. The way it is, like, there's nothing wrong with the combat, the stealth, the action sequences. It is a little repetitive, but I don't mind that. You know what I mean? Like, there's very few encounters that like threw me for a loop. Most of them were like stealth, take out a few of the enemies, whittle down the herd, if you will, and then I can usually blast my way or use whatever whatever bombs or whatever things I've crafted.
Did you play on?
I played it on normal. My first playthrough was on normal. So there wasn't anything that like I felt like I had to like, oh my gosh, this area's got such and such, so I'm going to have to do this way. Like, I never felt that, and I feel like that was the first game, but I can't actually remember every single encounter from The Last of Us Part 1. But nevertheless, like, the actual experience was fine. It was fluid. It was fun, and it was it was traumatizing when it was supposed to be traumatizing. So I will say what I did like about the combat was I did like how they did throw in like a proper boss in the game, which is kind of a spoiler, but I won't like elaborate. I'll just say that there were a couple actual that you could define as bosses. So there were like more challenging single encounters than just like, here's a bunch of like, I feel like the boss, quote unquote, of the part 1 was just the last level with all the fireflies, and that's about it. So, so I did like how they kind of threw in a little bit more challenging single encounters. But my criticisms of it are mostly to do with the wasted opportunities. They introduced a whole bunch of new elements, things like ropes and dogs. And I think that, they introduced dogs as a obstacle, and that's fine. But part of me was like, especially when you're playing, there's a certain character that you play as that we'll talk about in the spoiler parts. But when you're playing as that character like has a dog, and to not be able to like control the dog, I feel like was a bit of a waste. That would have been such a cool, like, introducing a whole new level to this gameplay, make the encounters even more interesting by being able to like give commands to the dog. The ropes, they had this beautiful engine that like made the rope physics like incredible, and I was so disappointed. I'm like, man, I should be able to set up like hanging traps where it like, when enemies step into it, they get pulled up, and then I can run over and stab them. There should have been like the character with the crossbow. That crossbow should have had we should have had an option to attach ropes to it and like drag people over to us, like, shoot them and drag. Like, I think Tomb Raider did that really well. The use of the ropes. I'm not talking, it doesn't need to be like Uncharted level rope, gameplay where you're like throwing the rope and swinging into battle, but like they could have done a very Last of Us style. You could have tied enemies together, you could have strung up bombs, and made like more effective traps with the ropes. And it was just, the ropes were almost always just part of the environment for puzzles. and that kind of disappointed me because they had that whole mechanic already. Like that mechanic was just there, and instead we got basically the same guns that we've always had in The Last of Us: machine guns, pistols, shotguns, bombs, Molotov cocktails, and that kind of stuff. So that was like my first major disappointment. And then the last disappointment was they introduced a new zombie type, a new fungus, cordyceps, whatever you call them, a new fungus monster. And they were not different enough. They were not distinct enough. Shamblers were like mini bloaters. Like that's literally, they were just a step between clickers and bloaters. And their only difference is that they walk up to you and spray their gas as opposed to chuck it from afar. But I was like, okay, so it's a big fat, slow zombie. And it's also spreads gas. Like I was like, they could have been more creative with the new enemy, the new types. I heard Neil Druckmann's like explanation of like, well, we wanted to do something that made sense for Seattle, but I don't see how that makes any more sense than anything else they could have come up with. You know what I mean? Like they could have, like their explanation was that, Seattle, it rains more, it's wetter in Seattle, so that resulted in shamblers instead of bloaters, I suppose. But I was like, they could have used that exact logic and applied it to like anything. They could have had when you're introducing a new enemy into a game, especially one that's got a predecessor. In my mind, I'm like, you need the new enemy to force the way the players change like their tactics. You know what I mean? Like, your old way of dealing with this doesn't work. So I mean, they literally could have done like a heavily armored zombie that requires you to get up close to get a knife through it. You know what I mean? So that creates a higher risk reward. Like, my bullets aren't effective against this thing. I need to get in close, but if I don't pull this off, I will die quickly. You know what I mean? That's just off the top of my head. I just didn't feel like Shamblers were different enough.
You made me think of a critique, which would actually be a good segue into my rundown.
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to cut you off, though.
Well, why don't we just... I'm mostly talking about combat, so if you have thoughts on combat, why don't you go ahead and share them? Yeah,
sure.
That's fine.
Okay. So what you just said, actually, it was a good point in that there isn't a specific enemy that requires you to play out a specific tactic. And I thought of that as a plus to the combat system in that we have the complete freedom to approach every combat scenario however we want. You can be completely stealth, 100%. And I guess except for with the bloaters, you could still be stealthy. With the
you can set up
boss,
bombs,
obviously you can't. But yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like, so there's bombs, there's Molotovs, which can be sneaky and trap-like and very disengaged. Then there's the upfront, in-your-face, pick up melee weapons and upgrade them with little nails, and like you can just beat people to death forever. Or you could use regular guns. You can use a silenced pistol. You can use bows and arrows and like recover your ammo and take your time. And like, so there's so many different ways to approach a battle. It almost seemed like the enemies didn't force you to behave a specific way. You looked at that as a fault because the enemies weren't varied enough, or like didn't require player specific action because you can just approach all of it the same way. I thought of that as like a genius thing. It's like, you can approach every single combat situation however you desire as a player. And with that, the upgrade system, the rate at which you upgrade your guns kind of helps with that. There's no way to lock yourself out of a bad build. Every upgrade matters a little bit, just enough to hit that threshold of like, I have an upgrade versus, this isn't enough, or I didn't find enough parts and I really wish I had more. And with that, the rate at which you collect ammo, it runs on a rail thin line of I'm going to run out of ammo tension, like Survivor, versus there's ammo here for me. It's like I always felt like I was going to run out of ammo, but I never actually did. And that's an amazing game design, like in there.
Yeah, you see, I think
come up with that rate.
I think Resident Evil did that better because I never felt. I always knew I was entering an encounter, and I would. If I was worried I was going to run out of something, I knew that the way the game works is I was going to find what I needed to make it. And maybe maybe my complaints are all due to the fact that I played it on normal. Maybe on like very, very hard, it is exactly, it is exactly the way I would have wanted it to be. So maybe I just, cheapen the experience by that. But, I disagree with the upgrades being meaningful in the sense that like every upgrade was just a little too small. Like I never felt like it was always just like, that's kind of nice. That's nice. I'll make that a little bit easier. But I also thought back and I'm like, I could probably play this entire game without needing to upgrade my character at all.
Right. And that's actually kind of a thing. Like that's sort of what they built into the game is you don't have to update or upgrade anything and you can still be a viable, it would be a little bit more challenging, I would imagine. But I think you can still do it.
Yeah, I just think of the freedom of combat approach has been done so much better in other games. Like the example that comes to mind is Breath of the Wild. Like you can literally fight any boss any way you want in Breath of the Wild, but it's harder if you do it a certain way. If you go up against Ganon with just chucking sticks at him and having an inventory full of sticks, like you're either gonna run out of sticks or you might be able to pull it off, actually. But you can't. But it's gonna be harder. So encounters are still designed to throw obstacles in your path that you have to think differently in order to beat. And very few of the encounters, I'm not saying that wasn't present in The Last of Us, but very few of the encounters actually made me think differently as to how I was going to do it. That said, there were still also plenty of encounters that like, oh crap, that didn't go the way I wanted it to, so I had to adapt on the fly, which is awfully fun. Depending on how it goes. I will say that my single favorite encounter in the game was in Hillcrest as Ellie, when you're in the like neighborhood and there's all the like it's like a suburban neighborhood that's like overgrown and stuff like that, and there's all it's like one of the first encounters where you really have to deal with dogs. And I remember failing it a bunch of times my first time, but then when I found the route that I took and I just nailed the stealth, and I was like, yes, I'm picking them off one by one.
It's so
and then
satisfying.
I lured some of I didn't like killing the dogs up close, so I would try my best to place a trap and then lure the dogs into the trap so they would die and I'd feel bad, but it wouldn't be like I, choked the life out of them or whatever, or took a switchblade to their throat. So I tried, because I am the softie when it comes to dogs, so I tried to kill the dogs as much from a distance as possible. But I just felt like that was the first encounter where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm really clicking with this combat. So again, it is not bad. I just don't think that it went far enough in order to like justify the sequel. So go ahead. Okay.
Level design wise, you actually put a note here that I'll get to in a minute, but I think the level design was amazing in the sense that it incentivized you to explore. There's a lot of exploration across all the different ran down buildings and houses. Like you want to run through these bedrooms and bathrooms and collect stuff and get all the stuff. You wanted to like look around and experience the world. At the same time, it provided the perfect battleground for all of the encounters. And it allowed you to utilize all the different ways you wanted to play. If you want to be stealthy, there are things that'll let you hide behind. If you need to get away because you've alerted somebody, like there's always somewhere you can go. But it's not too open. It's linear without feeling constricting. And it's not, except for that one Seattle Day One open world area, which we'll get to. That's my one critique about level design. But outside of that one area, the entire game felt like I didn't have to, like the levels didn't get in my way. And that was awesome. But your critique about how it doesn't make it clear when you can't go back, absolutely a problem. There should always be like something. Most of the game has some sort of like thing you fall or jump or climb that you can't make back, and it's kind of pseudo obvious. But there are other ones where you're like, oh, I didn't realize I wouldn't be able to go back.
There was some where like Ellie goes through a door and then like locks the door behind her, and it's like, wait, no. Yeah,
right.
that was super frustrating, and especially for someone like my approach to this game from like I desired to get the platinum, but I also wanted to do as much as I could to get the platinum without following a guide, because I really find a lot of joy in like I don't mind when they hide stuff and I have to find it. And if I miss a few of them, c'est la vie, you can't win all of them. But without you can't win all of them without a guide. But this game was like you needed to follow a guide, because because the guide would tell you don't do this until you've gotten these collectibles, and the game needed that because there were so many that I missed because I didn't mean to. I was like, no, crap, I want to go back. Let me go back and check that thing. So I do hate that aspect of the level design. But I agree. Otherwise, I really liked how there were very few corners that you couldn't get out of in the game, and that doing that while also making the levels seem like actual places that you could go to were like that would exist. So kind of that naturalistic level design that is also just a sheer, the level designers, bravo on that, because that was awesome.
Even that one like overgrown car garage or parking garage that was like half outside and half in, and like you could crawl up all the different levels, and I kind of got lost a little bit, but not in a like, it's because I'm me, and if you watch my live streams you'll realize that I'm super directionally challenged and I will just like run in circles and have no idea what's going on. But just like standing back and looking at like, this is exactly what I would imagine a post-apocalyptic 20-year-old collapse of a car garage would look like. and it's also my battleground where I can efficiently go through and stealth kill or action kill everything and escape and get away and have cover and hide. And it provided everything I needed in that area without feeling like I'm completely turned around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a genius. Like, I love the level design in this game.
Yeah, it's good. I will say, though, kind of in the same vein, one of my other problems with the gameplay was I do feel like the pacing was pretty bad for the first half of the game, and much of that had to do with the level design and the aforementioned open world area that just seemed unnecessary. Like,
yeah,
it was just...
Would it be spoilery to talk about any details about that, you think?
It's so close to the beginning of the game. I think that we should just say there's a semi-open world area. There's a trophy connected to it where you have to explore the whole thing, or like explore all the locations on it. And it's a part of downtown Seattle, and you just like, it's just thrown into the game to be there. It feels like, I mean, there's obviously they motivate it with the story at one point, but, you know, when I first read that trophy was going to be part of the game, I thought it was like, oh, there's going to be like a semi-open aspect of the entire game. But no, it's literally just one chapter where there's this massive open world part of it. There's tons of collectibles in it, all of which you need to get if you're going after the trophy or if you're a completionist. And it's just like, it goes to show that, like, as much as the design, I heard Neil Druckmann say, we made the game as long as we wanted to make the game. I'm like, no, you padded it a little bit. You clearly added, tried to pad the runtime a little bit by doing things like that. It's not so bad. If you're not going for the collectibles, you can run through the game pretty fast. But for someone like me who actually cared about exploration, collectibles, and kind of discovering things on my own, the pace really slowed to a crawl during certain parts of the game where I felt like I had to check under every nook and cranny. And don't get me wrong, I think it's cool the game gives me tools to make that easier, but at the same time, like, I don't want to necessarily use the tools. So maybe my complaint is not fully valid for that reason. But yeah, I just felt like the game's pace slowed to a crawl especially the first half.
I feel like that is the only pain point in the entire story, I think, is that one chapter. And I don't think it's too much of a spoiler because it could be a generic RPG quest, but you're supposed to find gasoline, and it's this quasi fetch quest thing. And one thing, like, you get the gas, and it felt very padded. But
yeah, they did that. They did that at other times too. Like, there's one point where a character is trying to get somewhere, and like the road collapses on them, so you fall into a pit, and then you have to do this whole section on a boat. Like crawling up like an old defunct.
But that was still linear.
Boat.
It didn't feel like the open world. You couldn't go.
No, you're right.
The boat stuff was all one way. It's all one direction. So
yes, but I mean,
backwards.
It's still game. In my mind, it's still game padding. Instead of just going from the one story beat to the next, you have like they get in your way in a way that's like, that's not necessary. Like, that whole sidebar that didn't add anything to the story or add anything to the characters. It was just literally to pad the runtime of the game. And
yeah, but it was like 10 minutes. It was weird. I agree with you. It was padding, but it was like
exactly
not like 2 hours, 3-4 hours. It was just like,
it's not
enjoyable.
Extra
10 to 15 minutes, right? And
and they give you
awesome. Like, the more they give you, the better.
Oftentimes they give you a cool reward for that too. Like that particular one, you get a crossbow, and it's like, whoa. So you have a new toy to play with. But I just, from a simple, like, they could have done that at any point. You could find the crossbow at the side of the road. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing that necessitates some of those story beats. So again, it's just, it's not a bad thing. It's just a little bit obnoxious at certain points where you're like, oh my gosh, I want to get to that thing. I want to see what happens when these two characters interact. And unfortunately, the game, even the linearity of it, throws you away from that. So cool. Do you have any other
if you played Uncharted Lost Legacy, there's a scene, a giant portion of the game where you explore, I don't even remember the country, and it's like a big desert area, open world, where there's like towers you have to collect and go in order, and it's a giant puzzle. It's just like that. That's the only section of the entire game of Lost Legacy where you have that kind of open world exploration, and this game does that with Seattle Day One as Ellie. And
they do that with Uncharted 4 too, right? In Madagascar, where it's the big open area.
Yep. Yeah. So they have a track record for that. Naughty Dog does. But yeah, that's all I have to say about go ahead.
Cool. Yeah. My only final thought is, it's not too much of a spoiler. I think I've already hit on it, to say that you do play as another character about halfway through the game, and it resets your progress, and you have to progress on that new character. And that was a bit of a pain too, because it was like, I just got used to using all these tools on Ellie, and now you're making me use another character with a whole new set of tools. And there is some coolness in that because the other character ends up playing a little bit differently based on the guns and the tools that character has. But the first, but again, it is irritating from a progress. I think that's there could have been better ways of handling that in my mind than just like resetting my progress. So I don't know what those ways are, but I know that I'm irritated. Like maybe, I don't know. We'll get more into that when we talk about the spoilers. So cool.
Yep.
All right. Then that's all I have about combat systems and gameplay. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with that? Or did you want to comment on the thing I just talked about with the resetting of the progress?
Yeah, that's like one of those game design decisions that you just can't please everyone. And every player is going to have a preference. And I feel like you can fall on one side or the other. You didn't mind starting over, or you did. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so the best way to do it, I thought it was okay. It wasn't a pain point for me. I wasn't excited like, oh, yay, I get to develop a whole thing.
Everything I just worked on, I've lost.
Right, yeah. But I also didn't feel like I was starting over either. I just felt like, oh, this is just different. And I have a different path, a different character. And I guess as long as it doesn't violate the core flow of the game, or as long as it doesn't violate the plot or anything like that, you're fine. It's just like I said, it's a game design decision that you're just going to you're going to make people mad or not. And in this, that starting over didn't interrupt the flow. In my opinion, it didn't wreck the plot. It didn't get in the way of anything. It was just that's just an opinion that you're going to be on either side. So,
Cool. Yep. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the platinum, since both of us have gotten it at this point. I got it last night.
Just in the nick of time for tonight.
I know. Gosh, it feels like this game's already been out a month. And I didn't think this game would take me a month to play, although I was playing it concurrently with Persona, so that probably had more to do with it.
You spent way more time on Persona over the last month than this.
That's true. I probably did. All right. So, what were your thoughts on the platinum?
It was ridiculously smooth. I did play with a guide. It was a text-based guide to avoid spoilers. I hate having to follow a video guide, because then you're watching it and then it spoils everything you're supposed to do, and then you just do what the video shows you. I can't stand that. PowerPyx, that's PowerPyx.com, has a great text-based guide that tells you where the collectibles are, what to look out for, without revealing anything. In fact, there are character changes that weren't even revealed in his collector's guide. I didn't realize that, am I supposed to, the character switched up? Like, oh, okay, I don't know what's going on with the collectibles. It was perfect. And so I followed this guide where I would just look at during a load screen or I'd pause it. I would look at the guide, see what's next, hit the next beat, and roll on. So I felt like it was incredibly smooth. The trophy list itself, to me, this is the perfect platinum. It's if you care about this game enough to want to do everything in it that it has to offer, it's attainable. There's no nerd rage invoking things, and it will take you more effort than just the story, and that's fine. But no difficulty related trophies, no ridiculous replaying the entire game 4-time trophies, and nothing online. There's no online trophies, nothing that requires you to play with anyone else or do things online based on skill. And so I love this list. This list is like chef's kiss to platinum.
Right, it's only
lists.
26 trophies too, which may be a blessing or a curse depending on how much you care about your actual trophy count. But the point system, like the one that builds to your level of your profile, is what matters, and they're almost normalized. Is it?
No, I mean, no, I'm not saying like I don't mean that in the sense of what I look at as higher. No, I just, like when you analyze a Microsoft game, the achievement list usually adds up to 1,000. That's kind of the standard. Some are 1,200 and some are like 1,500 or whatever. But when it comes to the trophy count, what matters is the breakdown of gold, silver, bronze. And so it always totals to a certain number of points. And most games are within a threshold of like 1,200 to 1,500 points. Gotcha. That's behind the scenes. You don't see that through the PlayStation itself. Sony never actually officially revealed that. The fans did all of the data mining to find out what each trophy's value is. But this game is a 1,200 point game, just like Doom Eternal, which has way more trophies. Yeah. And I'm looking at this now. So this game was 1,200. Doom Eternal was 1,155, and it had way more trophies. It had 34 trophies. So 9 more trophies than Last of Us Part 2 with 45 fewer points. So it's weird the way it breaks out, but I think this is the perfect 20-some trophies, 1,200 points. I think it's just awesome. That's perfect.
I did not have too many problems with it. I approached it a little bit differently. Like I said, I approached it without a guide. My first way through, I tried to find as many collectibles and as many things as I could without having to follow a guide, and did pretty good, all things considered. I probably got about 70% of things without needing a guide, and then I did a cleanup later. If you approach it like me and don't follow the guide the first playthrough, the cleanup is not bad. You've got a chapter select, and then so you can look at each chapter, see how many of each collectible you need to get, go in, take care of it, bada bing, bada boom, move on to the next chapter. I recommend doing it in reverse order because there's this weird thing where the chapters available to you are not fixed. They're based off of whatever your last autosave was. So make a manual save in the last chapter, and if you need to reload to that last chapter to get all your chapters back, that's cool. But do that before you start New Game Plus. It's kind of that's kind of an irritating design, but it's not bad considering that it's fairly easy to go back and just get the collectibles through the chapter select. That was a nice feature that they added. My two complaints are I wish that they had a better way of tracking what you needed left, because even though each chapter showed you what you needed to get in that chapter, there's no way of actually tracking it in the chapter. And
so if you're missing the third out of 4, you don't know. You just know you're missing one.
So what I would end up doing is I would, like, before I started a new chapter, I'd go through the list on the guide and compare, like, in the cases of like trading cards that you collect, it was easy to just find the name that I needed. But some things like the artifact notes, I had to be like, wait, was it Boris's apology or is it Boris's revelation that I need to, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so I'd have to go
add
through
another layer of confusion, and I'll build on that critique, was that depending on so if you start a new game, say you get collectibles A, B, and C, but you missed D, you can start a new game, skip A, B, and C, collect D, and the game will know that you've got all 4 across 2 different saves. But if you load the first save file, you'll see in your inventory collectibles A, B, and C. And then in the second game, you'll see in your inventory only D.
Yeah, so
even though the game sees that you have all 4, it adds a layer. So even what you're doing, where you're going into the game and looking at your inventory and you're tracking, okay, how many trading cards do I have? You might not have that trading card in this game, but you have a different autosave somewhere else where you did get it.
Yeah.
And there's no way to, like, objectively look at this outside of the game.
Yeah, outside of the main menu.
I followed a guide, so all that's superfluous because I just knew what I had.
Well, that's why I did it in reverse order, because I could count on the fact that each chapter I would start with it would show me all of the collectibles I had gotten up to that point. So I did it in reverse chapter order, so that I could each time I loaded into a new chapter, before I loaded out, I'd look and be like, okay, what ones from the previous chapter do I have and what ones do I not? And that worked out for me.
That's smart.
It was fine. But it was still time consuming in its own right. So my only other complaint was the New Game Plus second playthrough. That wouldn't have been that bad if they had given me the option to alternate characters with each chapter. So that way I could, because you have to get upgrades you have to get the pill upgrades and the gun upgrades on both characters separately, but you don't even get to play as the other character until halfway through the game. So you literally have to play through at least half of New Game Plus just to get that last trophy. And I wish there's also story reasons. I think it would have been interesting to actually, like, have at least the option to be like, I want to see this in the order in which it was intended versus I want to see it in alternating order. Because the story, that would have actually been a really cool way to freshen up New Game Plus, if you wanted to. But, so that was only other point of frustration. So cool. That was the platinum then. It overall is super achievable, just with a little bit of extra elbow grease then,
And to add one final note, the complaints that we have, I feel like are limitations on the system's operating. Like Sony's infrastructure for trophies in general, I feel like that's the limitation that Naughty Dog butted up against. Yeah. It's like, how are trophies tracked? How are they unlocked? And what do you have to do under the hood to, like, do that as a developer for the games? If you play Xbox, they've almost abstracted the entire achievement system out of the games. And you can even, like, there's a trophy or there's an achievement hunters helping. And this is built into the Xbox. So you just go into your account and, like, look at your achievement list, and you can sort them by recommendations. And they'll actually tell you, they'll track trophies outside of the game. So say a game says you have to kill 50 of a certain type and you've killed 47, it'll save that information off. And from out of the game, at any point, you can sort your trophy list by progression. So you're 97% to this trophy, you're 50% of the way to this trophy in this other game, and you're 25% ready to this trophy in a different game.
Give me. That's
right.
what PlayStation needs.
PlayStation 5 needs to do that. And I feel like this game, I said earlier, chef's kiss to the trophy list, because no difficulties, nothing is missable, doesn't require 4 playthroughs. But the hardships we just described, you would almost be like, you contradicted yourself that this is not a good trophy list because of the crap you had to go through to get it. But it's not the game's fault. It's not Naughty Dog's fault.
Right.
This is a Sony infrastructure issue that I hope it's resolved in PS5. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yep, cool. All right, so one final thing I want to talk about is I wanted to kind of, in a non-spoiler way, as much as we'll be very careful, but I think we can talk about these controversies without actually talking about the plot of the game. But I will say there's a lot of controversy. This game ended up being one that was like a controversial one, and there was kind of three reactions to this game. There were, and it seems like only three. And so I hope that this review stands out as a more nuanced discussion. But the three controversies and three reactions to this game that I noticed were either there was the universal praise and acclaim for it. So this was like the majority of publications gave this game 10 out of 10s, genre defying, incredible, amazing, no problems whatsoever, which is fine. Yeah. That's a review we see for all kinds of games, good, bad, and everything in between. Like, it's not, people are entitled to that opinion as well. And in many ways, the two of us actually kind of hold that opinion. It was a very excellent game, and we're trying to highlight some of the critiques. But also, both you and I loved the game. Then there's the people who have the opposite of that reaction. We didn't even play the game. We saw that there were LGBTQ characters in the game, and so we decided that we just hated it for that reason. Or we found out that certain things happened in the story, and therefore we heard the leaks, or we heard it from people, or got it confirmed from people. So therefore we hate the game, or maybe we even just played the first half of the game and just hated it. You know what I mean? But they hated it for stupid reasons that were not, in my mind, were not fair. And that's and that's why it got review bombed, and that's why it was crazy. So that was like one. And then there was the terrible controversies that came out of that, specifically the fact that many of the actors and creators just got death threats and stuff like that, which we here at 80-Bit Podsmash unequivocally disagree. Think that is the absolute worst behavior that you can engage in online. So please, if you're listening to this and you've ever sent a death threat, stop. Just stop. There's no reason to do that. Yeah, be a better person. Don't be sorry, be better, as our good gaming dad Kratos taught us. But so yeah, we completely disagree with that response. Laura, the big one was that Laura Bailey, who plays one of the characters, voice actress, she actually posted, she was kind and censored their names, even though they didn't deserve that kindness. But she basically posted a lot of the death threats that she was getting like texted to her, which is awful. So she is a wonderful, wonderful human being. She's amazing. She's in Critical Role, which is like 100+ episodes of D&D. She has go look at her Wikipedia page and look at the talent that she has given to so much games. She's movies. Jaina Proudmoore. Would you send death threats to Jaina Proudmoore? Come on, right? But even off camera, when you hear her interviews and how she talks and like how she presents herself, she's very real. And she's so loving and kind. She's just a wonderful voice in the gaming industry. And to think of someone like that getting death threats, you're like, really? Yeah. Really? Yeah, it's awful. So don't. Yeah. Just don't. The third reaction, so I talked about two reactions, either universal praise, universal hatred for it, or there's a third middle road where some people just didn't like the game. And were highly critical of it. And I think a lot of, if I remember correctly, I think there were actually a handful of like Japanese critics who, culturally just didn't really, or maybe culturally didn't identify with the game or just didn't like it. But there was some sort of middle of the road approach where, the game's not going to be popular with everyone. But there was this weird reaction that happened about a week or two into the game's release where the creators of the game, so mostly Neil Druckmann, who's the writer, the lead writer for the game and lead game director, I think. He had some interviews where he was basically like, everybody who doesn't like this game is just a bully or whatever. Like, he started to lump the genuine and these were like, I'm not talking about like, people who just had a bad reaction. I'm talking about like genuine journalists, critics in the industry who just didn't like the game for whatever reason. But like played it and they weren't hating on it for the same reason that the transphobe, the homophobes, or even just the people who never played, they weren't hating on it for those reasons. They played the game. They didn't have anything against, they just didn't like the story or they didn't like the gameplay or whatever. They had genuine critiques for it. And it seemed like a lot of the people who were responsible for creating the game were lashing out against them as well. And I'm like, even if you, for one, they made a great game. They should be proud of the fact that they made an incredible game and that the game got as much praise as it did. That should be but you shouldn't then look down upon the people who have genuine critiques of it, because the whole point of video game criticism is to make games better. And even if the game hadn't succeeded, you know what I mean, or hadn't been a success, even if the game had not, even if the majority of the criticism of the game was negative, you aren't entitled, even if you put your heart and soul, and even if you put all the effort and you make them, you get masters in their craft, and everyone comes together and you make the best game you can. And if it fails, that's life. You are not entitled, just because you work hard on something does not mean you are entitled to have it praised. So, that's not the case. In my opinion, that's not the case of The Last of Us. I think it ended up being great, but just the mentality that this guy has, that the game should be universally praised because he worked hard on it or whatever, that needs to be, you can't get better. You can't make better. You can't make video games better if you have that mentality. You might be able to make a pretty good game here and there, but you won't be able to continue to make art if you have that mentality. That's incredibly conceited. So that really turned me off to Neil Druckmann, and I got very mad when I saw those responses. There were other people too. Cory Barlog, who made God of War, who's the director on God of War. He came to the defense, basically saying a lot of the same thing, if people hate your game, that just means they're haters or whatever. It's like, no, they may have genuine reasons for not. Don't lump all the negative criticism in with the stupid criticism.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, is a nuance to I agree with you. There should not be an entitlement from a creator to expect greatness praised upon you because you've worked really hard at something. You should accept objective criticism for anything that you put out there, and you should humbly accept it and try to make something better, or maybe you don't. It doesn't matter how you respond to it, as long as you're not expecting praise and being bummed and ticked off at the people who are actually critiquing your thing. But given the context of all of the vitriol that you talked about of the three reactions, you're saying number 2 was this unnecessary toxicity coming from the internet. It almost clouds the vision, so to speak, of what's an actual critique versus what's just a silly
I get that.
Moron. And then those attacks on their crew are very personal. Death threats, individually attacking you as a person. A character assassination of an individual is completely ridiculous. And so if you're seeing your loved ones that you've worked so hard with in stage, you've done stage combat, I'm sure you've established a bond with someone. Imagine that over the course 100%. Of 5 years, where you're in a booth voice acting with them, or you're doing motion capture together on a set, and you're going out to lunches and dinners, and you're talking off the air about the characters and trying to build them all out. You develop this family mentality, and then you see the vitriol coming from the internet attacking you. You're going to have a herd mentality. You're going to defend your loved ones. You're going to defend your craft. And then it makes it I'm not trying to excuse Neil Druckmann's response. I'm just giving context to it. And that maybe there's a cloud, a chaff cloud of confusion amongst what's a real critique versus what is a toxic critique. And their responses were probably not the best on Twitter, because Twitter's not the best place to respond to things like that. And Cory jumping in, he's the family member who saw his brother get attacked. He's jumping in oh, you guys are messed up because of all the toxicity. And so you can't fault Cory, you can't fault Neil entirely. It just, you got to complete the whole story. And no, I still agree. Stand by. I completely 100% agree with you that there is zero room for entitlement as a creator. You do not get to be mad at someone critiquing your art because they didn't like it, even though you worked tirelessly on it. But you do have a right as a creator to say no to toxic attacks and unnecessary negativity towards your thing because they just feel like they want to hate you. And so
there was a petition to get people to change, redo The Last of Us Part 2 or whatever. And I hate those petitions. I hate them because they are, well, first of all, they're consumeristic and not artistic in the way that they evaluate things. The consumer is the one who says, you need to change this to be what I want it to be because I want to consume this. Whereas the person, the art critic, if you will say yeah, you made a bad choice. And now you have to live with that choice. Or, that's in the case that you made that something was bad. As we talked in our video games as art episode, there is good and bad art, or that's somewhat subjective, but even if it is subjective, the artist should be forced to live with that. I think of the same thing with Star Wars. It's like, yep, they made a bunch of bad Star Wars movies and they need to live with that failure, you know what I mean? And learn from it, because that's the whole point. Like, when you fail in an artistic endeavor, the whole point is to learn from it. And when someone, and that's the whole point of critics, that's the role that critics play. Because a lot of people are like, well, why do we even have critics? Why critics don't do or make or create anything? It's like, they don't. You're right. What they do is help artists hone their craft. Would you say the same about a teacher? Like, we have such a high regard for teachers in our society because teachers are the ones who teach us like how to be better, but teachers don't create anything of their own either. They they teach. And that's kind of what the role that criticism plays in
they create
art.
How they present the information, but they don't create the information.
Exactly.
They create the classroom, they create the platform, they create the cohesion that happens and like how kids learn, etc. There's a lot of creation happening from teachers. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
No.
When you said teachers don't create anything, they do. They create the entire curriculum for how they're going to convey the information, but they don't create the information.
No,
like
they're not creating new information.
Right.
I'm not trying to minimize. That's my whole point. I'm trying to make the comparison. We hold teachers in such a high regard for the way they do something. Critics are the same, because, you know, you can make the same argument too with critics, where you say they're still writers in their own regard. They're still creating written word and written language, and there's
a video
an
on
art,
YouTube, or
and there's an art to that as well. And there's an aspect of creativity that goes into that as well. But nevertheless, like, my point stands is, sure, they don't make anything new. They're not adding to or advancing games directly because they're not in the trenches making it, but they are the ones who help, like, because any good artist should learn how to take constructive criticism well. You never have to accept destructive criticism. Destructive criticism is the toxic crap that we're talking about, where it's just like, you suck, you're the worst, you're awful, get off the stage. Right. But a constructive, you know, I was in my theater training, we were always taught to not only give constructive criticism, but to accept constructive criticism. And constructive criticism is the only useful criticism for a creator. When someone just gives you praise, it feels good, but it's not helping you do anything. The only thing it does is it reinforces the good choices you've already made. Constructive criticism helps you make better choices, good choices. We're going to have a whole conversation about that at some point in the podcast, but that was my little mini rant.
Didn't we do an episode on reviews and review scores and about this?
I think so, but I'm not quite sure we talked about... I think we talked about reviews and review scores. I don't think we've actually talked about the art of criticism itself, and why the value that it has. So I actually do want to do it as a full topic. So maybe you'll hear this rant twice.
Sweet.
But,
all right, more fleshed out rant.
Yeah, for sure. More fleshed out rant. All right, cool. We're an hour in. This is a perfect time to segue into, say, hey, you got a full hour's worth of non-spoilers. So if you're just listening to this for the non-spoiler part, you're welcome, I guess. But we're about to get into spoilers, so you're no longer welcome. The second entire half of this episode is to be, you are banished forthwith from the kingdom of Rohan, unless you want spoilers, in which case, welcome to Rohan.
I'm marking 58 minutes even, because we're not going to edit the podcast. 58 minutes even is the transfer point. It happened 8 seconds ago from when I'm saying this. We're in spoiler territory. We are going to talk in depth about the plot, the characters, no holds barred. You have played the game. I highly, highly recommend. There's a lot of people out there that like to listen to Spoilercasts about video games that haven't played the game as a way of judging the game for themselves to see if it's worth their time. Don't do that. Please listen to the first hour of our podcast and assess the game from that perspective. Try to play this game as blanket as you possibly can, with as little information from anyone. It's hard. The game's been out for, like you said, almost a month, but go play this game before you listen to us talk about the intricacies of the plot and themes. It'll mean so much more for you.
I will only disagree in the sense that if you are the kind of person that looks up spoilers ahead of time, you're probably the kind of personality that actually prefers spoilers. There are some people, and actually there's some studies to show, I think we talked about this in our spoiler episode, that like knowing the plot twists ahead of time actually can make the story more enjoyable. But
okay. If that's your deal, then here you are. If that's your deal,
then here you are.
Yep.
Then I'm just trying to, Termite's trying to scare you away. I'm simply saying, like, hey, actually, if that's your cup of tea, that's your cup of tea. Like, enjoy it. I think a story that relies on twists in order to be successful is not actually a good story. So I will say this story, actually knowing, my second playthrough, knowing the twists did not actually diminish the story that much for me. So therefore, I don't think this story relies entirely on its twists to be a successful story. It works even if you know them ahead of time. So,
all right.
Cool. I mean, I think of the Sixth Sense. If you know that spoiler for the Sixth Sense, but we're in spoiler territory, right? Like, if you know that Bruce Willis is dead the entire time, then the movie is genuinely ruined for you. It's not a good movie when you know that.
Oh, really? I never rewatched it. I should.
It's not that great of a movie when you know that.
Huh.
But in this case, if you know, for example, that spoilers, Joel dies at the beginning, is killed by a character named Abby right at the beginning of the story. It actually doesn't diminish it. Or if you know, for example, that Ellie doesn't end up killing Abby at the end of the story, that's not. I don't think that ruins the experience for you. So if you're here for that, we've given the people who don't want spoilers plenty of warning. So we're in plenty of spoiler territory now. Let's go over really quick the major plot points and major beats and breakdown of the story. No?
Before we get into that, can we talk about how different our approach to the game was, only in that you read the spoiler? I want to know what spoiler you read. What did you play? What did you expect because of the spoilers, the leaks? Remember the story, the game was hacked. Yeah. Someone had released like Naughty Dog's crap, and it was posted to the internet. It was everywhere. It was all over Twitch chats and streams. Like, I had a thing spoiled for me. I'll talk about it in a sec. But I want to know what you heard before you started the game.
Sure. I knew that Abby was playable in the second half of the story, so I knew you were actually going to play as the person who killed Joel. I knew that Joel died. I didn't know when in the story Joel died. And what I had heard from the spoilers I read, which ended up being wrong, was that Abby killed Ellie as well. So I was actually expecting Abby to kill Ellie, and ended up being pleasantly surprised when she didn't. So those are the spoilers that I had read ahead of time.
Which are way more detailed. Like, you actually had a name, Abby. I had no name. I had no idea there was a second playable character at all. And I saw a spoiler, one line during a question and answer from Jeff Keighley that just said Joel and Ellie die, which is very vanilla. I mean, that's like the little, super with no context. It means nothing. You're like, okay, maybe it's right. Maybe it's not. You don't know for sure. It was just strung along in the Twitch stream. And so this is the only reason why I want to talk about this, because the story and the plot and the theme is caged. We approached it slightly differently. You had an expectation that there is this character named Abby. This character is going to kill Joel. This character is going to be playable through the half the game. I had no idea whatsoever Abby even existed. I didn't know anything about playing someone different. I didn't know there was a second character. And so that's just the framework and the context that we approach our playthrough as we go along in this spoiler cast from here out. Anyway, now we can go into what you want.
Sure, yeah. And it was, what was I going to say? Oh, I'm actually, because we both heard the same thing about Ellie, though, makes me wonder if they had been able to at least somewhat mitigate the leak by throwing off the leaker on that regard, because you and I both heard that Ellie died, and then Ellie didn't die, and I read somewhere that they originally were going to have Ellie die, or maybe it was they were originally going to have Abby or Ellie kill Abby. I don't remember, but maybe there was
fake footage, quote unquote fake footage, for that one scene where you see Joel walk into a room with Ellie playing guitar, and he says like, or Ellie looks like, or I don't remember which character said it, but I think it was Joel. Joel looked at Ellie and said, "You're gonna have to face this alone," or something. Actually, that. Or no,
I think it's. Are you sure you're gonna do it? And she's like, "Yes, I'm gonna kill every last one of them." That's where the name of that trophy, the platinum, came from. Is every last one of them? Yeah.
There you go. Perfect. And that scene actually was in the game, but it was with Jesse, and it was a totally different context as you separate yourself from Jesse. And so that was fake to throw people off footage made for like an E3 show. So maybe there was a version of the game that got leaked that was different, and the ending was different, and Ellie died.
Yeah.
And so,
well, the leaker was outside of Naughty Dog, so maybe it was just someone. Yeah, I don't know. So someone who came in
changed it last second, or the leaker got an old version or old build of the game.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. Anyways, so cool. All right, well, let's talk about the game then. Let's talk about the plot, and we're not going to spend too long of a time here. So we're just going to hit the major one. So story starts in Jackson. 4 years, I think, 3 years after the events of the first game. Joel and Ellie are living
4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
Joel and Ellie. Well, we'll get to that. Anyways. So yeah, she's living in her and Joel are living in Jackson, more or less happy. And then tragedy strikes when a team of people, ex-Fireflies that we find out, from Seattle, who are currently living in Seattle, have hunted Joel down to Jackson, and then in a snowstorm They end up running into him a little bit too coincidentally, but we'll, ignore that tiny little plot hole just for the sake of story. And anyways, Joel ends up being killed by Abby, as we mentioned. So this character named Abby, who is a part of this ex-Firefly group, kills Joel in cold blood. Ellie sees it. She gets there basically just in time to see Abby kill him with a golf club specifically. And then the rest of the game takes place. I should say the core of the game, the meat of the game takes place in these 3 days in Seattle. The first 3 days you see from Ellie's perspective. The second 3 days you end up seeing from Abby's perspective, but you don't get Abby's perspective until Ellie's story completes. So the first half of the game is Ellie's revenge story. She and her girlfriend, yes, she's got a girlfriend. She's a lesbian. It's fine. Yep. And they go to Seattle and the first half of the game is Ellie's story of hunting down Abby. Some twists are thrown Ellie's way. I sometimes get the characters mixed up. Some twists are thrown Ellie's way. The first thing she finds out is that her girlfriend she's been traveling with to Seattle ends up being pregnant because she had a boyfriend before they started dating, and it roughly equivocates the amount of months necessary to have gotten pregnant. So her girlfriend's pregnant, so she's wrestling with that. The father of the girlfriend shows up to help them. So he followed them and tracked them down to help. He's a friend of Ellie's, so they're on cordial terms. But so he shows up. His name's Jesse, and then also Tommy, the brother of Joel, who created the community in Jackson. He also went there. So there's like 4 characters from Jackson that are in Seattle at the time that you're playing those 3 days. So you're chasing down you're chasing down Tommy. You're with Jesse. You're with Dina for parts of the game, and so Ellie kills her, the long story short, Ellie kills her way through a swath of wolves, hunts Abby down to a aquarium, and when she gets there and she thinks she's got Abby cornered, she ends up running into 2 completely different characters who are also wolves, who were there when Abby killed Joel, but were not necessarily the ones who did it. So you don't really know much about them at the time. Their names are Owen and Mel. Abby kills Owen and Mel, and then the very last thing that Ellie sees before she gets pulled away by Tommy and Jesse is that the girl she killed, Mel, is pregnant, like very well along pregnant. And that's kind of the first kind of breaking point for Ellie when she realizes, I just killed a pregnant woman. There's not really much of it. Sorry, what?
Wasn't Nora first?
She did kill Nora, but like I just included that in the swath of wolves that she killed.
Yeah, but when she kills Nora in the hospital at the end of day 1, you see a struggle internally with Ellie that she had to torture Nora and subject Nora to the virus by accident because they were in the hospital. That's kind of like that's not quarantine. That's what's the starting point of a pandemic? Ground zero. The hospital's ground zero. So they fall through the floor and like she breathes in the spores and like Ellie has to go over and corners her. She's like dying, coughing, hacking.
Right. Ellie, as a reminder, is immune. It was one of the few moments where they actually utilized Ellie's immunity. So like the character, like she thinks that they're cornered, like, oh, you can't, there's nowhere to go from here. The only way to go is into this spore-infested basement or whatever. And Ellie's like, all right, cool. So she jumps headfirst into the spore-infested basement. And again, with the intention of being like, I'm immune to this, so I can torture you with impunity here. And she does.
The other side of that coin is that Nora's death is inevitable, whether Ellie tortures her or not. So Ellie could just stand there and like question her and not do anything and let the virus take her over herself and be the torture. And so the idea here is I can kill you quickly and end this now, or Ellie beats her to death and gets it out. So like that's the first like struggle internally with Ellie, and that was day 1. Then day 2, fast forward to the aquarium where she does kill Mel and Owen and realizes Mel is pregnant. And so like this revenge quest of hers is now starting to take its toll emotionally, and she's like reacting negatively.
Right. I mean, I fast forwarded. I'm just hitting towards. I'm just trying to hit the major plot beats. Is like we'll get into the nitty gritty of her emotional journey in a little bit.
Slow me down. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. I skipped over Nora, not because I don't intend on talking about Nora. I skipped over Nora because she's one of the wolves that So Ellie doesn't really have like a breaking point of like I need to change my priorities. My girlfriend is pregnant. My friends are here. Like I need to, that's the moment she realizes that like there's more going on than than her simple vendetta is when she accidentally kills a pregnant lady. And that's kind of like the end. That's the end. That's kind of the beginning of the end for Ellie's story. So, the day 3 ends with they go back. They all decide that like Ellie's going to have to just let it go for now. And they're going to go back to Jackson. And then Abby shows up. The 2 people that Ellie killed were her friends. She shows up. kills Jesse, the boyfriend, the father of the of the lesbian baby, and then she shoots Tommy, Joel's brother, and then the last line she said, or she doesn't do that yet. I'm sorry, no, that doesn't happen yet. She points the gun at Ellie and then says, we let you live and you wasted it. Yeah, we let you live and you wasted it. So then at that moment, the game flashes back, and then you play the rest. You go to, from Abby's perspective. So in Abby's story, she gets back from Jackson. It picks up right when she gets back from Jackson. There's a flashback from when she's a kid. That actually is important. So the first thing you see with Abby is a flashback from when she's a kid. Her dad was the surgeon that was going to operate on Ellie, and extract the cure, but who Joel killed. So that gave a reason for why she killed Joel. She killed Joel because Joel killed her dad, and all the Fireflies and a lot of people she cared about. So that's kind of like an immediate, we suddenly kind of at least somewhat get your motivation for killing Joel. And then the story picks up where, day one from her perspective, after she killed Joel, she's now in day one Seattle. And long story short, her friend Owen, the one who Ellie 2 days later will kill in the aquarium, he's missing. So she figures out that he's going to this aquarium, so she chases him to the aquarium, but on the way, she gets captured by the other group in Seattle, which is called a religious group called the Seraphites. So she gets strung up, and you encountered them briefly with Ellie, but you never really had a lot of experience with them. So she gets captured by the Seraphites, who are at war with the Wolves, the WLF, and she gets saved by two Seraphite apostates, quote unquote, who are people who turned against two kids, basically, that turned against their religion because one of the kids was transgender and decided to shave her head, which was forbidden, and identify as a male. So we will continue to refer to that character as a him, to be respectful. Mm-hmm. And so that's Lev. So Lev identifies as a man, as a boy, I should say. And Lev's sister Yara are the quote apostates. So they just happen to run into Ellie when Ellie is being hanged by these Seraphites, and they save her. Sorry, did I say Ellie? I meant Abby. I'll get them confused more than once. So they save Abby, and then Abby feels a sort of protectiveness towards them. So they escape in the woods together from all of the zombies, and Abby makes sure they get to safety. One of the girls the sister was, her wings were clipped. One of her arms was hammered by the Seraphites. So
and a very violent and visceral scene.
Yeah, it was very gross. So like Abby felt a sort of sense of like, oh, well, one of them's got a broken arm and the other one's this little kid, basically. So she ends up going back after she runs into Owen and finds that, or did she makes it to the aquarium and finds Owen, right? At that point. Yep. Yeah. So then
she's looking for Owen, but she wants Mel because Mel's a medic.
Right.
And Mel can do anyway, she leaves them in a trailer and then goes by herself.
And then she comes back for them
the next day because she meets Owen in that boat, and there's a weird scene and there's some nudity and it was kind of awkward. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how I should feel. I got a half boner, but it's not. And I'm like, what? And it's like, I don't know what's going on. And then she wakes up.
Spoilercast, but we're so family friendly. Okay, calm down here. So she goes back, finds the kids, and feels a protectiveness towards them. So again, her organization, the Wolves, they don't care for the fact that she's now protecting these other, like the other group, the Seraphites, because they're at war with them, the Scars, they call them. So,
essentially, Abby defected, and the Wolves are actually hunting her down to get her back because she was not allowed to leave. Owen had defected, and they were ignoring him, and they had their own plan in mind to go attack the Seraphite Island. And so her organization, the Wolves that she works for, was actually hunting her down. And so she went back to find Lev and Yara, realized Yara has Yara has a massive infection and needs to take Lev to go back to the hospital that is wolf controlled, the same hospital that Ellie found Nora.
Right. So I'm going to skip ahead.
Hospital.
Yeah, I don't want to get too mired down in the details. We'll just skip ahead and say that, like, they get some medicine. They help Yara. They amputate Mel, who is voiced by the impeccable Ashley Birch. She amputates the arm. But then Lev, they make a plan to escape to Santa Barbara to try to find the last of the Fireflies. But then Lev goes off on his own to try to get his mom because he doesn't want to leave the city without his mom. But his mom is like a super religious nut job. So Abby and Yara take a boat to go after Lev to go to the island, the same island where the Wolves are going to attack to try to wipe the Seraphites out in the middle of a hurricane.
Yeah.
Exhausting. Just explaining the plot. So there's this huge, crazy. You're like trying to escape the island with Lev and Yara. And the mom, of course, is killed. Lev has to kill his own mom. It's heartbreaking. And then they escape the island while this major, massive battle is going on. And that's when you come back to the aquarium to find that's when Mel and Owen were killed by Ellie. So you come back to the aquarium as Abby to see your friends who you're just about to escape with have been murdered by Ellie. So then you go to the theater as Abby, and then you confront Ellie as Abby. So the story then picks up. The two timelines have merged. We have seen the entirety of all the events that have happened in Seattle. Ellie and Abby fight. Abby, you're fighting Ellie, the character you played as, the character you helped and loved from the first game. You're fighting her as Abby. You beat the crap out of her, and Abby is about to. Dina, the pregnant girlfriend, comes to try to help Ellie, but she also gets the crap beat out of her by Abby, and then Abby's about to kill her, and Ellie's like, no, she's pregnant, and then Abby says good, and is about to pull the knife across when Lev, thank God, Lev goes, Abby, don't do it, or whatever, and Abby stops. So Abby then doesn't kill Ellie and just says, if I ever see you again, I'll kill you, or whatever, or I don't want to ever see your face again, or whatever. So then fast forward, Ellie and the last, what you think is the end of the game, takes place at this farm where Ellie and Dina are living happily ever after. Psych, not really. Ellie's still haunted by Abby killing Joel, so Ellie decides she's going to go back and kill. So you think the game is over, but then Ellie's like, no, I'm still going to get my revenge.
Yep.
So Ellie, I'm like, gosh. So Ellie then goes and hunts down Abby. Abby is in Santa Barbara now, trying to find the last of the Fireflies, which was the dream of her friend Owen, boyfriend/friend Owen. And then she ends up getting captured while in Santa Barbara by another group of baddies, and then it just happens to be around the time, or happens to be a month before Ellie shows up and hunts her down. So Ellie hunts her and tracks her down to this group that has captured her, and then Ellie ends up saving her from this group of bad people who've like strung her up for trying to escape, her and Lev, and then they escape to some boats. And then Ellie decides, now's the time I want to fight you. I'm not going to let you escape. I'm going to fight you. So Ellie and Abby fight. It's the climactic final battle of the game. And then Ellie gets the upper hand, and she's drowning Abby. And then she has a flashback to Joel, and then decides to not. So then she also has a point, like Abby, the two conflicts mirror one another. She has a point where she could kill Abby, and she chooses not to. And then that's where the game ends. She goes back to the farm where she was living happily ever after with Dina, but Dina and the baby are gone. And so she kind of has to live with the cost of not. So sorry, I kind of took the reins on the summary, and it ended up being like a whole 10-minute summary. So I apologize, but there was like a lot of ground I wanted to cover. That's why I didn't want to get mired down in the details of like who killed who when. Yeah. So cool. Now let's break it down. What did you think? What are your thoughts on the theme, the plot, the story, all of the things I just talked about, and sort of the major beats of the story? Just kind of, break down some of your thoughts. I'll give you a chance to talk for a bit.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to break down here. Ellie is completely all right. So I took notes as I was playing. I wanted to try to, actually, it wasn't as I was playing, it was when I wasn't playing, but I wanted to chronologically order everything. There's a lot of flashbacks that happen, and we know that Joel killed Abby's dad, but then like that was the ending of The Last of Us Part 1, that scene where Joel is escaping with Ellie and lies to Ellie, and says that there is a cure. 12 or more other people already have this cure. There's nothing they could have done, and they didn't need you, and so I took you out of there before they could hurt you and harm you. So like Joel rescues Ellie, quote unquote, and then Joel is living with this lie, and he actually spills the beans to Tommy in the intro of The Last of Us Part 2. Joel then gives Ellie a guitar, teaches her how to play. Ellie has this awesome birthday surprise flashback with Joel, and this is the chronology order, right? So I'm starting from beginning to end here to build my plot response here. So like Ellie and Joel have this great relationship. Joel is surprising Ellie at this museum. That was like my favorite line in the game, was when Abby pointed the gun at Ellie and said, "I let you live and you wasted it." And like the emphasis was like in the anger and like it was so good. But my favorite like chapter to play was totally this museum scene when they explore dinosaurs, and it's the most ridiculous surprise. Like Joel and her are walking through the jungle, and Joel's like, "I have a surprise for you," and Ellie's like, "What is it?" what is it? Is it dinosaurs? Like the most outlandish thing in the world. It turns out it is dinosaurs because they go to a museum.
I love it's the first guess too. Is it a dinosaur? And then it ends up being a dinosaur.
Yeah, it was. And they just have like this fun, playful banter, and they go through and they learn about dinosaurs, and you can put a hat on Joel for a trophy, and like it was really cool. And then the best part of that whole scene was the space exhibit they went to, where they sat in a moon rover and they went into,
because in the first game, like Ellie expresses her desire to want to go into space, so like that's one of her dreams.
Yeah, it went full circle, and then they like reenacted the. Joel gave her a Walkman with a cassette tape in it that had like the radio communication of the moon landing of Apollo 11. And Joel and Ellie had a helmet, like you could go pick a space helmet, and it was just like I almost wept at this scene at how exciting and how cool and how intimate it was and how vulnerable they were, and like all this like father-daughter just like bah! It was so impactful and so meaningful. So that whole scene happens. And the reason why I'm building this up emotionally is because there comes a scene where Ellie and Tommy are hunting the infected on a patrol mission, and they meet up with Joel. And then Joel and Ellie go out to a guitar shop. And then after that, the next time they see each other is when Joel finally confesses to Ellie that he lied.
Well, because she ends up going, in one of the flashbacks, she ends up going back to St. Mary's Hospital, where the climax of the first game took place. And she ends up like finding out she finds a recording, basically. I think it's actually, ironically, I think you don't know it at the time, but I'm pretty sure that was Laura Bailey's voice on the recording when I listened to it again. So I'm pretty sure it's Abby's account of like the fact that like they're like, he was the only doctor who would have been able to synthesize a cure, and Joel killed him and took the girl. So even if we go hunt them down, there's no one else who can make a cure. So it would be pointless or whatever. So yeah, she finds out on her own, and then Joel
confronts Joel with it.
She confronts him and says like, if you lie to me, we're done. And then he tells, it's heartbreaking too. The face acting and everything in that scene was just like, oh gosh, it was like soul crushing. You could see the pain. You could see the pain on Joel's face of like, I've kept this lie for years, and now I've been caught in it. And he's still, even in that moment, you can see that he's still considering lying to her. And it's like, don't. Just tell her the truth, even accept the consequences, like, oh man, it was a tough one, but he did. Yeah.
And then they go back to Jackson, and there is a definite, like, complete fellowship break, relationship broken. It's surface level only for years. And then the dance scene that we don't get till the end of the game happens. And, Ellie and Dina are dancing together, and they have a kiss. And then there's this bigot, I guess his name is Seth, I think it is.
Seth, it was Seth.
Yeah, confronts them and like says, we don't accept this here, get out of here, whatever. And then Joel steps up for Ellie out of nowhere.
He says a very mean word for lesbians that we won't repeat here.
yeah, exactly. It was, and then Joel like gets involved, and then Ellie cusses Joel out for getting involved at all. Like, get out of my life. Like, still within that context of you lied to me, we're done, don't do this. And then leaves. Now, the flashback as the very last scene of the game.
Can we hold off on that? Because I like,
but the reason I bring this up is because you think throughout most of that playthrough, once you get that flashback of the dance scene, you're like, that was the last interaction that Ellie had ever had with Joel. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't. You don't know the actual last interaction you had with Joel until we'll talk about that later.
Right. Until the very end,
you're playing with. So that was the chronology. I needed to order all that in my head, and it just sets the foundation and the context for everything that Ellie is going through. And this goes in, so
it's like the flashbacks serve as kind of a demonstration of like, it is both the good times and the bad times and everything in between. Like they have the best day together when they go to the museum, but then they have like the worst day when she finds out that when they have that confrontation at St. Mary's. So it's like, the flashbacks are like, they're really going through this relationship and showing how complicated it was. And then to have all of that cut at the, have all that cut short before there's any real closure.
You got to talk about the very last ending.
Well, are you just talking? Are you going to talk about anything about Abby's flashbacks? Are you going to fill in those gaps?
Well, the reason why I'm bringing all this stuff up about Ellie right now is because it shows the meaning behind Ellie's revenge quest even more. Which it takes the whole game to get it. But when you see Joel die and Ellie is there watching him die, it is so much more impactful as you progress through the game and the story is unveiled. But once you know it all and you go back and you see it again, it was expertly crafted, and the flashbacks are Ellie's musing her memories as you play as her. So like you play through the first half of the game as Ellie, and then you switch to Abby. But as you're playing as Ellie, you're getting all the Ellie flashbacks with Joel. That's her thinking about these things, dreaming about them in her quiet time as a character, revealing it to the player. So like the story and the plot progression is kind of a byproduct. You're actually getting Ellie's memories and interactions with these memories for herself, and kind of building up her motivation for this revenge quest. And
right. Well, did you watch the girlfriend reviews thing that I linked to?
So meant to.
It's really good. I actually ended up watching a bunch of their videos because I ended up liking their style. But but the video itself was notable to me because number one, it blew up online because people started trashing it because again that toxic gamer contingent that hates The Last of Us Part 2 ended up like trashing this entire like review because the review is actually like favorable towards The Last of Us. But they talked about how like both parts of both Last of Us Part 1 and Last of Us Part 2 end up doing this really interesting thing with the narrative where they make you think you're playing one story and then revealing that it's a whole different story. And in Part 1, you think that you're playing this story about like, oh, we've got a immune girl, she's going to cure the zombie apocalypse or whatever. That's the story you think you're playing. What you end up playing is a story about the love between a father and a daughter. Or a surrogate daughter in this case. And then the same thing happens in Part 2, where you think the story is a story of revenge. And then they turn it on its head and actually reveal that the story is a story of forgiveness. And now we'll talk about that flashback. Right. We'll talk about that flashback because it comes full circle. That the final flashback you see is right after the dance. You see Ellie encounter Joel, and they have this discussion where she's like, she says, I don't know, or so she basically, actually, no, it's better to talk about Joel's line first, because Ellie says to Joel, like, why did you do that? Why did you rob me of the chance to, sacrifice my life to save the world? And Joel says, again, one of the lines, we talked about this in our fatherhood episode, and I'm so glad they included this line because it brought me to tears. I think I was like, Macy was like right next to me while I was watching it. And I was like, I'm not crying, you're crying. But Joel says, if God were to give me a second chance and I could go back to that moment, he looked at her and he's like, I would do it all over again. I was like, what? I love you. So that was heartbreaking and wonderful and beautiful and such, again, testament to fatherly love. But so that's like, again, that to me was like in a exchange of two lines, you get both the theme of The Last of Us Part 1 in Joel's line, and then Ellie says what ends up being the real theme of The Last of Us Part 2. Ellie says, I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that, but I will try. And that was the last conversation they had before he died, basically.
Right.
So
and that's right. Like, oh my gosh. And
but again, that's Ellie. The whole point though, is that the story of the revenge is not the real story. The revenge is a setup for the forgiveness plot. Ellie having to forgive and break the cycle with Abby, is secondary to Ellie having to forgive and break the cycle with Joel. So the entire story is not Ellie coming to terms with Joel's death at the hands of Abby so much as it is Ellie coming to terms with Joel's actions in the first game. So the two plots kind of mirror each other. And so that's what I love about it, is because the entire game, again, because I thought that Ellie died, right? So I'm going into this entire game expecting that and being like, this is just such a bleak game of hatred. And it's so cyclical. Like I kept pulling, I kept pulling out all the moments. There's this like small conversation between Mel, Abby, and a character named Manny, who is another wolf at the very beginning of Abby's story, where they're talking about their war with the Seraphites. And they're like, yeah, well, don't you miss back when there was a truce and we didn't have to, didn't have to fight all the time or whatever. And the character was like, yeah, well, then they had to go kill that group of ours or whatever. And it's like, well, we only killed that group of theirs because they killed the kids. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like looking at and so, Abby, I think even caps that conversation being like, yeah, it's not our fault or whatever. And it's like, I'm sitting here frustrated because I'm like, this is a mirror to what's going on here. Like everyone has a reason to hate each other. You know what I mean? Like everyone is perpetuating the cycle. You did this, so I'm going to do this. So, you killed Joel, so I'm going to kill you. Well, Joel killed my father, so I'm going to kill Joel. Well, Joel was trying to save me because they were going to kill me. You know what I mean? Like everyone has a reason, a motivation for the hatred. Someone has to accept responsibility first and break the cycle. So when we got to the confrontation between Abby and Ellie, and I thought that Abby was going to kill Ellie, I was thrilled when in that moment, and Lev stops her and it's so great, but Abby breaks the cycle and she's the first one, the character you hate, the character that the entire first half of the game you're like, I want to kill this B word because she killed my friend Joel, who I played in the first game, and I loved Joel, and she killed Joel. I hate this woman. And then you play her story and you're like, I actually kind of get it. Like, I don't get why you killed Joel. That act was unforgivable. Don't get me wrong. But that doesn't change the fact that you're still a person who has empathy, who still cares, who can still do good things and saves a little trans kid and her sister and, and wants to just escape.
I got lots of thoughts about that.
No, there's thoughts about that. But like, you play through Abby's story and you realize this is a woman, even though she did something awful and unforgivable out of hatred, she's still capable of great, good things and good growth. And then that is epitomized when she forgives Ellie for killing. She has just as much reason to kill Ellie as Ellie has to kill her in that moment.
Yeah.
And because Ellie killed not only her lover, but killed her lover's pregnant. It's complicated. It sounds very soap opera-y, but like, she killed an unborn child. Like, that is Ellie's actions are equally as unforgivable as Abby's in that moment. And Abby is the one who chooses to break the cycle first and forgive. And she's not saying, in doing that, she didn't say like, oh, we'll be best friends now, we'll reconcile, or anything like that. She simply said, I don't want to see you again. I'm not going to let your actions destroy me as a person. And it's a beautiful moment. And then Ellie tries to ruin it by going and trying to kill her again. And so I was super frustrated because, again, I thought, well, this is where Ellie's going to die. Now Ellie's going to die because she's perpetuating the cycle and it's going to bite her in the butt. But it doesn't. In fact, Ellie gets the upper hand and she starts drowning Abby. And in that moment where she's drowning Abby, the flashback she has a brief flash of Joel in that moment where they have that last conversation. And that's when you realize that the reason Ellie's motivation for not killing Abby was the exact forgiveness that she needed to show Joel. It's like, I'm not going to, I don't know how I can forgive you, but I'm going to try. That is the theme of the game. It's like, man. So I thought it was beautiful how well crafted that ended up being.
And all of that you just talked about is teased out in this idea of obsession. And it starts like Joel was obsessed with saving Ellie in the first game. And that was surrogate daughter, right? At the very end, he killed everyone and took and stole Ellie for himself to be his daughter. And Ellie continued that. It cost Joel everything to do that. Now Ellie loses across this game in her revenge quest, and because at the very last ending about like, I was willing to forgive you. I'm not willing to forgive you, but I'm willing to try. Right? Joel was killed. She was robbed of that chance to even get to try to forgive Joel and actually reconnect that relationship. So she was so blinded by anger and hatred for Abby that she continued on this quest and ended up losing absolutely everything. It cost her everything, all the way down to like, she had Dina and the baby in the farmhouse. Dina looked Ellie straight in the eye and said, Abby doesn't get to ruin this. Like, you need to stay here and be happy where you're at. She won. Ellie won. Like, she had Dina, she had the kid in the farm in the middle of the game, and she didn't need to go on. She did not need to go kill Abby, but she still did. The obsession of Ellie and wanting to murder Abby and get that revenge. And then, like, it cost her Jesse, her friend, which was the father of Dina's kid. It cost her a relationship with Tommy that was strained with Maria. They did not want, like, there was obviously tension when he showed up at the house and was telling her about, hey, we found Abby, she's here, and Dina was pissed. So, and then she goes after Abby again, right, in California, and she finally chases her down to the very last scene. That's it. Like, she has given up her original life in Jackson. She gave up, or she lost all of her friends, and then she's finally here at the point with which she can finally kill Abby and achieve the ultimate goal of revenge and forgives Abby. Like, she breaks at that point and lets Abby go. And then she returns to the farmhouse. And what's there? Nothing. She's lost Dina. She lost the kid. All of the stuff is gone. All of her things are relegated to the room upstairs. And then you don't think about it in the moment, but Abby bites off her ring finger and pinky. So Ellie is missing 2 fingers on her left hand. And she goes to play the guitar, and the guitar symbology is absolutely incredible. Joel gave her that guitar and taught her how to play it and taught her a song. And she's playing this song, and like, there's so many emotional moments sprinkled out throughout the game involving the guitar. And she picks up that guitar and goes to play that song and can't, because her 2 fingers are missing. She cannot even play the song that Joel taught her. And you just weep. You're like, oh my gosh, she has literally lost absolutely everything in her life.
Because even though she made a good choice at the end, she still made the choice to pursue
cost her
hatred. And that it's like, it's the forgiveness is not what cost her. Because if she still would have lost everything if she killed Abby. You know what I mean? She still would have lost it all.
And that is a great segue to Abby, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say the fact that she chose to forgive Abby means that there's still like in a way there's still a hope for her character. There's still a hope for her to she can now form connections because that those flashbacks wouldn't go away killing Abby. You know what I mean? Like that's what she thinks. She's like, I think that like I will find peace if I kill Abby, but we know as viewers, we know that she's not going to actually find that peace. So the fact that she kind of reaches that point of forgiveness, is actually, I found the ending to be kind of hopeful, but also kind of a bittersweet ending, just like the first game. You have the bittersweet ending of the first game of like Abby and Joel are alive and together, and that's sweet, but it's bitter because there's this. Ellie and Joel are alive, they're together, but it's bitter because they have this lie and this gap now between them. This says the same ending where it's like Ellie has made the right choice. She's saved her soul, if you will, but at the same time, she's lost everything because she chose hatred in the first place. She chose vengeance in the first place. So it's a really great contrast of like vengeance versus forgiveness as a theme. And I think it handles the material pretty well.
And then Abby. So continuing I'm adding the theme of obsession and what obsession costs you. So Abby, having discovered her dead father at the onset of the 12-year-old she was, she lost her father by the hand of Joel. And she immediately devotes her entire life to training her body to be a weapon and a machine for no other purpose than to hunt Joel down and kill him. And that is shown through a different flashback with her, where she's with Owen at the Seattle Aquarium when they first discover the aquarium. At least Owen has discovered it first, and he is showing Abby because they're in a relationship. And so she's constantly saying, we need to get back to training. I have to go train. I'm out of here. Like, she's not invested or even present really in the moment with Owen, because her mind is so distracted by this revenge quest. And so she's on the same path Ellie is at a different state during the game. And so Abby, at the beginning of the game, when she kills Joel, that's her win, quote unquote, right? She did it. And she's left empty and she's left unfulfilled.
Right. She's a great example of what Ellie would have been like if Ellie had gone through with killing Abby. Contrast. That's how we know. Yeah, that's exactly how we know. And we know that it cost her everything too. She's castaway relationships. Her friendship with Mel was strained. Her friendship with Owen was at an arm's length. She didn't have meaningful relationships because she was so obsessed with Joel her entire life, and it cost her everything. Like, she didn't really have a life either. And if she would have let it go and not killed Joel, she could have had a more meaningful life. And that is personified in Lev, because when she finds Lev and Yara and is rescued by them, she leaves them in that trailer, realizes that she needs to go back for them after finding Owen. That's kind of her click. Like, that's her new focus. That's her moment. That's her moment of redemption in a lot of ways. It's what gives meaning back to her life after she's lost the meaning.
There's just a quick line in there that says, Lev is like, why are you helping us? And she says, I don't know, guilt, ? Which shows like the evolution of, okay, this guilt affects me and it's going to push me in a direction. I'm going to behave a certain way based on guilt. But that's shallow, and it will require you to do the emotional work to get at a more meaningful motivation. And that happens kind of like, there's no actual dialogue that indicates that's happening. But the fact that she sticks with Lev and Yara and goes through that entire quest to the hospital and back to get Yara the care she needs, and then brings her to Mel and does the surgery and continues to travel on with Lev and go to the island of the Seraphites. And like, really, she changes from this obsession with killing Joel and this being left empty, realizing that Owen is not going to give her what she wants, and he wants to run off and do his own thing, and she's not interested in that because she wants to help someone. So she finds this like desire to finally like fulfill her life.
Channels her obsession into helping someone instead of just trying to hurt someone. And it's that, and again, in a lot of ways, redeems her soul. She realizes that like the cycle of killing and the cycle of bloodshed, because again, what's important also is that this is the characters that she gloms onto in this regard. Glom is probably a negative word that I don't intend. The characters that she chooses to identify with, those are her enemies. They're the same people that she's been killing for years. So the game, another theme that, and this one I can't claim to have picked out myself, but this one really was in the girlfriend reviews that they talked about. It really shed some light on it in a way that was well done. They really pick out the point that like one of the themes of this game is the whole idea of like trying to identify with the other. So there's the two ideas. There's the ego, which is the self, and then there's the other. This idea of otherness. And the game is in a lot of ways a thesis on how to break your ego in order to care for the other. So in the same, because for, again, for the first half of the game, Abby is the other. She's the other, and you are Ellie. And I leaned fully into that. You could have heard, you heard me. I was like, I'm killing every one of these people. They killed my horse. Yep. They made me kill dogs. Like, screw the, so when you're like, I had reservations when I was beating Nora over the face, I was like, nah, I leaned into it. I'm like mashing that square button as hard as I could, because that B word held me down. When I had to, like, when I was watching Joel die, she was the one who was holding me back. So I leaned into it, but then the game then just takes drives a truck through your ego and forces you to suddenly play as this other character who, again, is very other. Like it was a very intentional choice to have Abby as, this woman with these, almost disproportionately, buff arms. Like, she does not look like a woman that we're used to seeing in video games. Granted, she looks like actual women in real life. So, it's cool. I'm glad there's representation for women who have body types like that in this game. But it's very other and alien to the average gamer, when they get behind the wheels of Abby. But then you start to identify with Abby because Abby has this meta narrative where she has to identify with a character that she sees as other. And again, that's even further exemplified by the fact that Lev is transgender, which again is another thing that gamers have a hard time accepting, as evidenced by the toxicity around this game. Lev is transgender. That bothers and irritates people, and people have varying beliefs, but suddenly you're forced, and I speak for myself, I'm like, I really genuinely cared about this character, and wanted him to be happy and wanted him to be safe, and so you feel what Abby feels in that moment, and this game just breaks you. Not only does it give you I don't consider anyone killing someone out of revenge for killing one of their loved ones as a, quote, justification, but they give you some soft justification, at least a point which you can understand. They give you this understanding as to why Abby killed Joel. But more than that, they give you a reason as to why Abby is lovable, not just hate. You know what I mean? They give you plenty of reasons why she's hateable at the beginning of the game, and then they suddenly give you the second half of the game to give you a reason why she's lovable, and at least sympathetic.
And that's exemplified in Santa Barbara when that her and Lev are good. They're fine. Everything's great. They went to Santa Barbara. They found it. They found fireflies. They're going to go into this house and they're going to find a radio and they're going to communicate with fireflies. And there's this joy, this excitement in both of them. They're super happy. They found their purpose in life. They've got a goal in mind and it's working in their favor, and they're finally done, and they put all the stuff behind them with Ellie and Joel, and the murder quest and the revenge quest is all done, right? And then I knew, because I know The Last of Us, I know how the game was, I predicted that radio conversation was not good, and it was actually going to be a trap. I didn't realize how bad of a trap it was. They immediately get captured and taken off into a camp for 3 months and beaten and enslaved.
Just 1 month.
Oh, it was 1 month? I thought it was 3.
I believe that they said the Rattlers were like, oh, we've had that girl in our camp for a month when Ellie. Okay. Because you think it's happening really concurrently. You think that Ellie is there. So Ellie goes to hunt her down. You think that Ellie is there at the same time. And so you think that she was only captured a few hours ago, but no, they're like, no, we've had her for a month. And my mind immediately went to the worst possible scenarios. I'm like, oh God, what have they been doing to her for a month? Right. But they didn't go into too much detail. Next time you see her, she's strung up for trying to escape, almost crucified.
When you said that she's lovable, that you actually love, you like her, it goes from the complete opposite of being an other foreign thing to someone lovable. It was epitomized. My love for Abby was epitomized in that moment of excitement with her, that she is finally achieving her goal. Things are going her way and she can do all that. And I was actually elated as I was playing this game. Also speculative that it wasn't going to work out in the end, but waiting to see what was going to happen. And so you see that full cycle with Abby. She's winning. Yeah. She's getting somewhere, where Ellie is constantly not.
Ellie is backtracking,
losing more. Yep. They're on the same track. They're just at different points on the track. Yep. And Abby is farther ahead than Ellie is. But Ellie,
which makes you then rooting. You end up rooting for Abby, in that, because you're you have grown. Because that's what the entire time I'm like. The entire time for the entire Seattle portion of the game, I'm sitting there being like, are any of these characters going to learn anything? That's what was where I was almost to the point of despair. I almost didn't want to finish the game. I think I told you, I was like, there's a part of me that's it's going to force myself to finish this. I'm glad I did. Because again, the entire time I'm sitting there being like, none of these characters are learning anything. And that's the point, I wanted them. It's part of they do. they do learn something. That's my point is the
but
forgiveness.
It's Ellie not learning, Ellie not changing, Ellie just being blinded by this vengeance and hate and constantly doing the same things, like killing Nora, killing Owen, killing Mel, and seeing how it's wrecking her internally, but she's still pushing, and then leaving her dream life behind that she talked about on horseback with Dina in Seattle, saying, oh, one day we'll dream and have a farmhouse. Like, Ellie's not learning. And it is frustrating because that takes place over more than half of the game. And you see the same mistakes Ellie just makes over and over. But
whereas the character that you hate, the character that you're hunting for the first half of the game, you see that character making good choices and learning and growing and realizing that her obsession, that she needs to channel her obsession into something productive and helpful. And then you even see her, again, the object of that same positive obsession, if you will, that same love being Lev. It's that object that gets her to stop the cycle. It gets, Lev is the one that keeps her from killing Dina and Ellie. It's the idea that like Abby is the one who stops. Like you said, there are different points in the same journey, and Abby is the one who stops first because Abby is the one who learns the lesson first. And then the last chapter of the game is Ellie catching up to Abby on that same lesson. But yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's a very beautiful, well-crafted story. I'm going to say we are an hour and 45 in. There's one thing I want to discuss, or there's two things I want to discuss, so I'm going to skip my other thoughts. I'll quickly just add, I don't think it's a perfect story. I think it was very well done. It has its weaknesses. My main criticisms are, the game does rely a lot on post-apocalyptic tropes. There's this whole trope of like, oh, if society were to collapse, then humans would never, ever work together. And there's a theme of, like, humans not working together. The reality is, like, whenever we've seen society collapse on micro scales, on things like Hurricane Katrina or certain, like, civil conflicts in other countries, what almost always happens is, like, people actually band together to make sure that, like, they're taken care of. Like, that's just something that's... It's
like
it's
today,
literally...
the overwhelming majority of the United States wears a mask.
Yeah, exactly. It is something that...
Fight. Yeah.
Right. It's something that... it's coded into our DNA, actually. Like, we evolved to cooperate when times are tough. That's literally how we evolved. We wouldn't have survived if humans were in constant competition with one another. We wouldn't have survived certain extinction events. Yep. Mm-hmm. So that's a trope that has gotten kind of old for me, especially after shows like The Walking Dead, where it just tried to beat that theme of like people are awful to a pulp. It kind of has ruined that for me. So, I'm glad that the game ultimately ended on a note of cooperation, but for much of the game, it was just like, okay, here's another group of people that all they're going to do is take advantage of one another. And then also the idea of like, there were so many times, I know this is just a nitpick, but there were so many times when characters sustained wounds that should have been fatal, that didn't kill them. Like
Tommy's gunshot wound.
Right. Tommy's gunshot wound. He survived. Ellie's was, I mean, she had to have had multiple fractures throughout her entire body, and yet somehow she survived and was intact, not only intact, but intact enough to like then go back on her vengeance quest for the last chapter of the game. Like no, girl's gonna at least be walking with a limp. You know what I mean? Right. Like Dina too, she took a knife to the belly while pregnant. That's gonna get infected. Like there, it's so many things where it's just like, okay, they're stretching my suspension of disbelief pretty ridiculously. Also, the game is just it's not a feel-good game. That doesn't make it bad and doesn't even really make it unfun, but what it does is heavy. It makes it does make it miserable for parts. And again, for part of the, like when the part of the story where it's already kind of slow, like in Ellie's, the first half of Ellie's, like day one of Ellie, like the game's already slow and it's already so bleak and they killed my effing horse. I just was miserable playing this game for large portions of it. So, there were moments of joy scattered here and there. But I really do wish, honestly, what would have made Ellie's story a lot better is if she had spent more time with Dina. Like, you only really get to spend time with Dina in that first half, and then Jesse's your companion for the second half of the story, or you're alone. And having Ellie alone, I think, was just miserable because you just simmer in Ellie's. And I know that was intentional.
What you're supposed to do, though.
I know.
The player being,
but that's my point, is like they made deliberate choices, and I don't think that all of the choices landed. I can recognize them for being choices. I can recognize them for being intentional. I can also, and then I can also then subjectively decide for myself that it just didn't land for me, or I'd wish that there had been something else to temper it. But again, that doesn't make it bad. It just means that I had a subjective experience, and I shouldn't get criticized for that, Neil.
I don't think Neil was talking to you, and he was responding.
I know. If Neil ever listens to this podcast, you made a really good game, man. But if you ever flop, please don't let your ego. Please don't be too proud. You should still get every ounce of praise for working hard on a game. Everybody, the team who made Anthem should get the praise for working hard and putting their soul into trying to salvage that game. Still was a bad game. So sorry, I'm getting off track here. The one thing I want to ask you, the one thing I want to discuss. So those are just my criticism. I didn't know if you had any criticisms. You're welcome to interrupt me and add here. But if you don't have any additional criticisms for the story, then I will ask you a question that I want to kind of end with here, and that is, who's the villain of this game?
Yeah, that's the hardest question, isn't it?
There's not. Well, I mean, the answer. It's a trick question. The answer is there is no villain. There is no hero either. And a lot of people, I've seen a lot of discourse online that's like, is Abby the villain or is Joel the villain? So they're trying to paint Joel as like, well, Joel's the instigator. Joel is the one who antagonized the entire. Like, Joel is the whole reason the plot happened, right? I only counter that with saying,
in the first game, you could almost argue that Joel is the villain.
Well, but I counter that by saying, like, Joel doesn't, like, the game. One of the things the game is trying to say is there are no villains. Like, your idea of a villain is flawed. This mustache twirling bad guy who wears all black and ties women up to trains, that's the product of melodrama that is outdated. Like, the reality is that there are no real villains because just the whole fact that there's a whole contingent of people that hate the game simply because Joel dies is indicative of the fact that we love Joel. We identify and care for Joel. I will say that, in contrast, like, yes, Joel did a bad thing, but I will say his motivation, Joel did what he did out of love, as opposed to Abby and Ellie who do what they do out of pure hatred. Like, they truly are just trying to get revenge. Whereas if Joel could have reasoned with the Fireflies and negotiated his way into saving Ellie, he would have done it. Like, he would have done it happily. Whereas Ellie and Abby, their whole quests for vengeance are entirely, like, unreasonable in the sense that I mean that in the most strictest sense of you could not reason with Ellie and you could not reason with Abby them out of their quest for vengeance. And therefore, again, not saying that what Joel did was forgivable. What I am saying is that I identify more with Joel's reason for what he did, because what he did to save someone he loved. Whereas Abby and Ellie were trying to kill someone they hated. And so I do contrast that. So I would never paint
at the
Joel
expense of the ones they love. Like,
exactly.
Ellie lost Dina and the baby, and Abby lost a potential great relationship with Owen, and she left that behind because they were both so hell bent on their revenge quests.
Right, exactly. So I would never, in my mind, I entirely reject the notion that Joel is a villain, but I will also reject the notion that Joel is a traditional hero. He did what he did out of love, but he also killed a ton of people to do it and was willing to shed a lot of blood to do it, and didn't really truly try to talk and negotiate his way out of it with anything other than the barrel of a gun. And similarly, again, but then you can't say that Abby is the true villain either, because yes, she killed Joel, but like, again, we realize that Abby is the first one to demonstrate growth and the first one to, in many ways, regret. I mean, she said she's helping them because of guilt, which indicates that she regrets what she did. Abby is the one to regret killing Joel. Like, what? That's crazy. So like, Abby's not a traditional villain either. And then again, it's tempting to say, well, Ellie's the villain because she doesn't learn and she doesn't grow. No, because she does. She does end up like, it's the whole story. So like, there is no villain, there is no hero. There's just a really truly complicated mess of a tale of complicated messes of people and their complicated messy emotions, and they do a really good job.
It's so relatable. We are our own heroes in our own stories, in our own lives. We make people mad. People don't like us. There are people that hate Dan Grathwall. There are people that hate Danny Bowen. There are people that disagree with us out there. Like, we are the villain in someone's life, and we are also the hero in our own life, and that's what this game kind of teases out. That's real life.
Right, and maturity is coming to the realization that you're not a hero.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, when the mark of maturity, the mark of true, I think one of the marks, there's many, but one of the marks of true wisdom is being able to say, I'm not a hero, I'm just me. You know what I mean? I'm just me in all my faults, in all my strengths. So many people go through their lives being like, I'm a good guy, I've got reason, everything that I do that hurts people is like understandable, but everything that others do to me is unforgivable. You know what I mean? Like that's the reality, like coming to maturity is coming up and saying like, I sometimes do crappy things because I sometimes can be crappy. Sometimes I can be a villain even in my own story. You know what I mean? And self-destructive and all that stuff. Like, so the fact that this game is able to like bring that out, and demonstrate that in a way that's tangible, again, puts it on the same pedestal of, in my mind, at least puts it on the same pedestal as God of War and Last of Us Part 1. And, because those games both teach us lessons as to how to be people. You know what I mean? Yep. God of War teaches us how to be a father that is flawed. Last of Us teaches how to be a father that is flawed. Last of Us Part 2 says how to be a person that is flawed. So, whether that's so I love it. I really wanted to really quickly end and talk about, what I would love to see from the future of this franchise. And I will say, on one hand, I wouldn't mind if they capped it off here. The Last of Us may be one of the best zombie stories out there, but it's still a damn zombie story. And I would like to see Naughty Dog do something new, move into a different direction instead of just trying to revamp their old existing franchises. I would love to see them take a long break from Uncharted. I would love to see them take a long break from The Last of Us and try something new now.
They really like tied a bow on Uncharted. Like, have you played the ending of Uncharted 4?
Yeah, I mean, they opened the possibility, right? They opened the possibility of the daughter, but they really like they ended Nathan Drake on a happy, ending there. So, but on the other hand, if they were to do a part 3, I think I told you I have a pretty good vision for what I would do if I were rewriting it, and I would
before you get into that,
okay,
let's just actually talk about the ending, which we haven't discussed yet on the show.
Wait, what?
So we haven't talked about the ending in our entire Spoilercast. Yeah, we haven't actually addressed like all of the ending.
What did we miss? We talked about her forgiving.
So when you beat the game and you see the final cutscene,
I gotcha. Yes, the end of Abby's story.
Yep. Yeah, the end of Abby's story is when you go back to the title screen, when you load your New Games Plus save, you see Catalina Island, which means Abby made it. Her and Lev made it to Catalina Island, and we can assume that she found the contingent of fireflies that exist there. Her story is complete and it's happy. Ellie, on the other hand, missing 2 fingers, can't play the song that Joel gave her. I'm weeping. Walks off, leaves the guitar behind, which is a symbolism for I'm done. Like, I'm leaving all of this behind. And there's a thing on the internet, and I don't know what truth there is to this, but she's wearing the bracelet that Dina gave her, the friendship bracelet, which she is not wearing when she first leaves Dina, but she is wearing it at the very, very end. So you can assume maybe that her, and then the flashback happens, right? And if we're led as a player to believe that the flashbacks are Ellie's actual thoughts as they happen in the moment she's going through, she's thinking of that very last conversation she had with Joel where she's willing to forgive. Maybe she's projecting that onto Dina and is willing to go back and ask for that forgiveness from someone else. With that friendship bracelet on, maybe she's going back to Jackson. We don't know where Dina went, but so we don't know for sure. And as a person who loves epilogues, I'm all about epilogues, long epilogues.
You want a nice closure, tight bow, but it's not going to give you a tight bow.
So this game doesn't, and we don't for Ellie anyway. I mean, Abby is kind of good. I'm good with Abby's ending. So with Ellie, you're like, I don't know what's going on. You just realize it's a bleak ending because she has lost and sacrificed absolutely everything in her entire life. She is literally alone. She's nothing. Not a single person is out to find her. You see all of her crap packed away in the upstairs attic, left to be forgotten. No one is looking for Ellie. No one cares for her anymore. She's gone. She is alone. And
which sets her up perfectly for a part 3.
Hang on. In the first game, she actually says, in the very first game with Joel, as a child, her worst fear in everything is being alone. And at the end of The Last of Us Part 2,
yeah, good point.
No inference at all about the friendship relationship, what I just said. She's alone. Like, that's it. That's the end of her story. She's done. And even though she forgave Abby at the end and didn't kill her, she still lost absolutely everything, including her revenge. So, she's left with nothing. And then you just
which is a blank slate, which is a great opportunity for some growth in Part 3.
Your fan.
Right. So my Part 3 story, if I were to write it, would be my fanfic. Yeah, my fanfic for Part 3. I would love, Ellie would start Part 3. Ellie ends, again, to go back to the idea of mirroring, Ellie ends Part 2 where Joel began in part 1. Joel has nothing. Joel is just a smuggler out to live for himself at the beginning of part 1. Has nothing, no one. He lost his daughter, lost his brother. Not lost, but his strained relationship with his brother. Like he doesn't have anything in part 1. And that would be the same position Ellie would start presumable part 3. She would start at the point of having no one and being a hardened, grizzled, and I want like an older Ellie. I want like either middle age, like, or Joel's age, like, middle to late age Ellie. I would love to see a time jump of like 30 years for Ellie.
So
it would
she's
be
like
in her
40s, like late 40s, maybe 50s.
Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Yeah. Gray hairs, wrinkles. She's now old. She's lived a hard life since the events of part 2. Maybe Dina forgave her, maybe not, but she's clearly living on her own. I would love to see her maybe it's JJ, maybe it's the boy, but I would love to see her get a hold of a child that, she's just told she has to escort maybe she's a smuggler like Joel was, and she has to escort a child. So basically what I want for part 3 is I want part 3 to be a mirror of part 1, except from now Ellie is the parent. Now Ellie, the quote parent. Now Ellie is the one who has to learn and grow to love a child. And then I want the game to basically end revealing that the whole reason she's smuggling this child in the first place is because that child is immune, another immune person. And then Ellie, who everyone has forgotten is immune at this point, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. Ellie is now the one who finally gets to sacrifice herself, not only to save a child like Joel did, but in this case to finally fulfill her quote purpose, as an immune person. Again, obviously there would be a lot in between, but it would be very important. It would be very important to keep the secret that the child is immune from Ellie, so that Ellie doesn't know until it's revealed to her at the end, giving her a chance to realize this is what it's all about. And then finally, because that's the only other weakness I can think of part 2, is they don't really ever deal with Ellie's immunity except as a tool with which she uses to kill people. And don't get me wrong,
it's her life's meaning. And right. So the immunity in the first game, when she found out, like, her entire life, she wanted her life to mean something. She told Joel that, and Joel robbed her of that in his lie by taking her away from the hospital and not letting it happen. So she felt like her life was meaningless until she was able to start forgiving Joel and having that relationship, and then went on her revenge quest. And so like now at the end of the part 2, her life really, in her mind, like, could be perceived as meaningless. Like she really has no purpose in life.
So that's why I would love to see a part 3 bring full circle. Not only does her life have meaning, it has the same exact original meaning that it had in the first game, which is
so again, that would be a closed loop.
I get that the game is not. I get that the original game is not about the zombie cure. But neither would this. This would be about a character finding meaning after having lost their meaning, and then also. It would finally be the motherhood game that I want. You know what I mean? Like, I want a game that really explores the idea of motherhood. And they could do that by having Ellie have to be a mom to someone and then give up her life for that child. I think it would be a perfect like way to cap off the entire story and bring it full circle, while also giving the opportunity to explore the nitty gritty, down to earth. What is it like to be a mom? And what is it like to be a character? And then they could have, again, Ellie could be passing on all these lessons she's learned from Joel to give meaning back to her relationship with Joel. You know what I mean? To find that forgiveness through the lessons he passed on to her. It would be so good. So, Neil, obviously you've been listening for 2 hours to our podcast. If you're listening to this one, there you go. There's your free, Penguin approved, plot line for The Last of Us Part 3. Take it.
All we ask in return is free review copies. That's it.
That's all we want. Yep. Cool. All right. That's
millions
all I have.
of dollars you make.
I mean, there's so much more we could talk about. The last one in Final Fantasy, we did a breakdown of all the characters. We don't have time for that. We're already 2 hours in.
Oh yeah, we'd be here for another 2 hours if we did
right.
that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I would love to go into a little bit more criticism, but that's the story. Those are my thoughts. Do you have any other closing thoughts that you wanted to share about the future of the franchise or anything?
I want it to go away. I think this is a good, despite my love for epilogues, and I want a nice typo and everything, I think this is a great time to step away and see what Naughty Dog has to offer on PlayStation 5 with an entirely new IP. Let that team just go buck wild on something totally different, and let Uncharted and Last of Us and Jak and Daxter be done. And let's see what else they have to offer. So I think this ended very well.
Cool. Awesome. I can't disagree with that. That again, I would like a part 3, but I would equally happy if this is just the end of that. So, maybe not equally happy. I would be a little bit morose, bittersweet, but it was always a bittersweet franchise. So cool. Yep. All right. Well, what are your thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2? Please share with us if you played it. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your responses to the thoughts we had. And if you haven't played it, but listened to the entire Spoilercast, tell us if you think that what we talked about was interesting. Or if you never want to hear us say the words Ellie, Abby, or The Last of Us ever again. Termite, where can the good people of the podcasters of the internet find us if they want to interact with us?
I said at the beginning of this Spoilercast that we are normally a weekly video game podcast. So that episode goes live every single Monday at midnight. And you can find links to the show and all of our platforms at 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bit Podsmash. We have links to Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher. And then if you want to interact with us, we are across all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have a subreddit, and that's also 80bit Podsmash, all one word, all lowercase. And we also have a Discord, which there's a link to in every one of our show notes and all of our episodes. And some of our social media links have links to our Discord. So find that link. You can jump in and interact with us there. And then finally, we are also Twitch streaming every single Wednesday evening, 8 o'clock Eastern Time at 8 p.m. at twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash. So you can interact with us and chat live on the fly in front of everyone and talk with us. So plenty of places for you guys to give feedback. I'll continue to say, go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. We will read that review on the show. It doesn't matter if it's 1 star, 5 stars. It doesn't matter what you say. This is the perfect time to troll us. We will read the review as long as it's family friendly. We will read it on our next podcast that we record after this. We leave one between now and then.
Fantastic. Well, the next episode that goes live is our review of Sucker Punch. In light of Ghost of Tsushima dropping this week, so check that out. It will be good. I know because I just listened to it and edited it. And then after that, we have an episode about junk food and games, so look forward to that as well. That's also already recorded in the bank. And then after that, we'll be talking about The Last of Us again, but from a perspective of accessibility options and controls. Huzzah! So we will look forward to you all listening to that next week / this week. Huzzah!
See you next week.